Rain hammered the cracked pavement outside the emergency room entrance where Nia Hollowell stood frozen, still wearing blood-spattered scrubs from a 12-hour shift, staring at the eviction notice taped to her apartment door. 3 months behind on rent. $40,000 stolen by her ex-husband during the divorce. And now this. Marcus Reed, the man who'd promised her forever, laughing in a downtown nightclub with another woman while Nia worked herself into exhaustion just to survive. That's when she made the decision that would change everything. She walked into that club, asked a dangerously beautiful stranger to dance, and discovered too late that Jun Seo Kang wasn't just wealthy. He was a Korean Mafia boss whose name made grown men go pale with terror. Some mistakes you can't take back. This one would consume her completely. If you want to see how deep this obsession goes, how love and violence collide in the heart of Chicago's criminal underworld, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in Chicago Memorial's trauma bay flickered twice before dying completely, plunging the blood-slicked floor into semi-darkness. Nia Hollowell didn't flinch. Her hand stayed steady against the gunshot wound, applying pressure while the backup generator kicked in with a mechanical groan that vibrated through the soles of her sneakers. "I need 2 units of O-negative and get me someone from surgery," she called out, her voice cutting through the chaos without rising above conversational volume. That's what 4 years in emergency medicine taught you. Panic was contagious, calm was armor. The kid on the gurney couldn't have been older than 19. Gang colors still visible on his torn jacket, eyes rolling back as his body tried to shut down from blood loss. "Stay with me," Nia said, leaning close enough that he could focus on her face instead of the overhead lights. "What's your name?" Devin." The word came out wet, bubbling. "Devin, I need you to keep breathing. Deep breaths. You're doing great." He wasn't doing great. He was dying. But sometimes a lie delivered with enough conviction could keep someone's heart beating just long enough. Dr. Pacheco shouldered through the trauma bay doors, already snapping on gloves. "What have we got?" "GSW to the upper right quadrant. Entry wound near the liver. No exit. He's lost at least a liter. Pressure's dropping." Nia rattled off the information without looking up, her hands still maintaining compression. 19 years old, found unconscious in an alley off Ashland. Pacheco took one look at the wound and his jaw tightened. "Get him to OR2. Now." The orderlies moved fast, wheeling the gurney toward the surgical wing while Nia peeled off her gloves and dropped them in the biohazard bin. Blood had soaked through to her scrubs, warm and sticky against her collarbone where it had sprayed during initial assessment. That made 3 gunshot victims tonight. 5 stabbings, 2 overdoses, and it was only 11:30. "Rough one," said Lisa, one of the other trauma nurses, appearing beside her with a protein bar and a look of exhausted sympathy. "You okay?" Nia accepted the protein bar without really seeing it. "Yeah, fine." She wasn't fine. Nobody who worked overnight shifts in a Southside trauma center was fine, but you learned to bury it deep enough that it didn't show on your face. You learned to compartmentalize the image of a teenager bleeding out on the table, the mother screaming in the waiting room, the violence that poured through those doors every single night like the city itself was hemorrhaging. "You still on until 6?" Lisa asked. 7, picking up Rodriguez's shift. "Jesus, Nia, when's the last time you slept?" Good question. Nia couldn't actually remember. The days blurred together now. Hospital, apartment, hospital again. Sleep happened in 4-hour increments that never felt like enough. Food was whatever she could grab from the vending machine. Showers were quick, functional, forgettable. "I'm fine," Nia repeated, and walked away before Lisa could push further. The break room was empty except for the perpetual smell of burnt coffee and someone's leftover Chinese food decomposing in the mini-fridge. Nia dropped into one of the plastic chairs and stared at her phone. 17 missed calls, all from the same collection agency. She deleted the voicemails without listening to them. She already knew what they'd say. The same thing they'd been saying for 6 months. "You're 3 months behind. We're escalating this to legal. You need to call us back immediately." Marcus had cleaned her out. $40,000 from their joint savings, emptied 2 weeks before the divorce finalized. Money she'd saved working doubles and overnight shifts, putting herself through nursing school while he finished his MBA. Money that was supposed to be hers, legally, according to the settlement. But Marcus knew people, had lawyers, made the money disappear into offshore accounts and shell companies until even Nia's own attorney told her it wasn't worth pursuing. Cut your losses, he'd said. Move on. Easy to say when you weren't the one drowning. Her phone buzzed. Text from her landlord. If rent isn't paid by Friday, I'm filing eviction papers. I'm sorry, Nia. I've been patient, but I can't wait anymore. Friday was 3 days away. Nia had $1,100 in her checking account. Rent was $3,000. She closed her eyes and let her head fall back against the wall, exhaustion pressing down on her chest like a physical weight. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. She'd done everything right, worked hard, married young, planned for a future, and Marcus had torched it all without a second thought. Hollowell, we need you in Bay 3. Nia opened her eyes, shoved the phone back in her pocket, and stood. Work was the only thing that made sense anymore. The only place where she had control, where she could fix something, save someone. The rest of her life could fall apart later. She worked straight through until 6 a.m., when the shift change finally released her into the cold gray dawn. The rain had stopped, but left the streets slick and reflective, neon signs bleeding color across puddles. Nia walked 4 blocks to the bus stop, too tired to feel the ache in her feet, too numb to register the cold. Her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a bill collector. It was her friend Janelle. Girl, you need to get out of your head. Come to Vanguard tonight, just for a couple hours. You can't keep living like this. Nia almost deleted it. She had another shift starting at 6 p.m., which meant she'd need to sleep most of the day just to function. Going out was irresponsible, reckless. But then she thought about Marcus, about the last time she'd seen him, 3 months ago outside the courthouse, climbing into a Tesla with his new girlfriend. Some 24-year-old marketing assistant with perfect skin and a designer handbag that probably cost more than Nia made in a month. He'd looked happy. He'd looked free. While Nia worked herself into the ground just to survive. Fuck it. I'll be there at 10. The Vanguard was the kind of downtown club that catered to Chicago's upwardly mobile professional crowd. Overpriced cocktails, exposed brick walls, and a DJ who played just enough throwback hip-hop to keep the dance floor packed. Nia had been here exactly twice before, both times with Marcus back when they were still pretending their marriage wasn't imploding. Tonight she wore the only dress she owned that still fit. A simple black number that hit mid-thigh, paired with heels she'd forgotten how to walk in. Janelle met her at the door, already 2 drinks in and radiating the kind of aggressive positivity that only a corporate lawyer with no student debt could manage. There she is! Janelle pulled Nia into a hug that smelled like tequila and expensive perfume. You look good, girl. When's the last time you got out? I don't remember. Exactly. That's the problem. Janelle grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the bar. We're getting you a drink, we're getting you loose, and we're getting you laid if I have to personally vet every man in this building. I'm not getting laid. That's the attitude that needs to die tonight. Nia let herself be dragged through the crowd, the bass vibrating up through her ribs, voices and laughter blending into a wall of sound that was almost hypnotic after the clinical silence of the hospital. For a moment, just a moment, she felt almost normal. Like a woman in her early 30s who was allowed to have fun, to be reckless, to forget about eviction notices and debt collectors. Then she saw him, Marcus, standing near the VIP section with his arm around that same blonde girl, laughing at something she'd said, his hand resting possessively on her hip. The air went out of Nia's lungs. He looked good, better than he had any right to. Expensive suit, fresh haircut, the kind of easy confidence that came from never having to worry about rent or survival. Oh, hell no, Janelle said, following her gaze. Don't let that asshole ruin your night. But it was too late. The humiliation was already crawling up Nia's throat, hot and acidic. She'd worked a 12-hour shift covered in someone else's blood while Marcus drank overpriced vodka and played house with his replacement. I need air, Nia muttered, turning toward the exit. Wait. But Nia was already moving, pushing through bodies toward the door, her vision tunneling. She made it halfway across the club before Marcus saw her. Their eyes met. For one suspended second, Nia watched recognition flicker across his face. And then something worse. Pity. He pitied her. The rage that surged through her chest was so sudden and consuming that she actually stopped walking, just stood there in the middle of the dance floor while people moved around her like water around a stone. That's when the voice came from behind her. "You look like you're deciding between walking away or burning the building down." Nia turned. The man standing 3 feet away didn't belong here. Everything about him screamed wrong for this place. The perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, the way he held himself with absolute stillness while chaos swirled around him, the dark eyes that assessed her with the kind of attention that made her skin prickle. He was Korean, early 40s maybe, with sharp features and black hair styled back from his face, handsome in a way that felt dangerous, controlled. "Excuse me?" Nia said. "You were staring at someone." He gestured with his drink toward where Marcus stood. "Ex-boyfriend or ex-husband?" "That's none of your business." "You're right." He took a slow sip of whatever expensive whiskey was in his glass. "But you're still standing here instead of leaving, which means part of you wants to make him uncomfortable." Nia should have walked away. Every instinct told her this man was trouble. The kind of polished, predatory trouble that women in her tax bracket had no business entertaining. Instead, she said, "And what would you suggest?" The corner of his mouth lifted, not quite a smile. "Dance with me." "I don't even know you." "That's the point." He set his drink down on a nearby table and extended one hand. "One dance, he'll notice, and when he does, you'll know whether he's worth the anger you're carrying." It was insane. It was stupid. Nia took his hand. His palm was warm, dry, his grip firm without being aggressive. He led her onto the dance floor with the kind of easy confidence that suggested he was used to people saying yes, used to getting exactly what he wanted. The song was something slow and hypnotic, bass-heavy. He pulled her closer, not quite against him, but close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and woody that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice low enough that she had to lean in to hear. "Nia." Junseo. His hand settled against the small of her back, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. They moved together, and despite herself, despite the absurdity of dancing with a complete stranger, Nia felt her body start to relax into the rhythm. "He's watching," Junseo said after a moment. Nia didn't look. "How do you know?" "Because if I were him, I'd be watching too." There was something in the way he said it that made her pulse quicken. Not a line, not flirtation, just a statement of fact delivered with absolute certainty. "You do this often?" Nia asked. "Rescue random women from their exes?" "Never." His eyes held hers, dark and unreadable. "But you looked like you were about to break something." "I prefer controlled demolition over collateral damage." Before Nia could figure out how to respond to that, movement caught her peripheral vision. Marcus was walking toward them. "Nia?" His voice cut through the music, sharp with barely concealed irritation. "What are you doing here?" She turned, and the expression on Marcus's face was priceless. Confusion, jealousy, and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "Dancing," Nia said. "Is that a problem?" Marcus's gaze flicked to Junseo, then back to her. "Can we talk? Privately?" "We're divorced, Marcus. We don't have anything to talk about." Junseo's hand tightened slightly against her back. Not possessive, warning. "The lady said no," Junseo said, his voice perfectly calm, perfectly pleasant. "You should walk away now." Marcus stiffened. "Who the hell are you?" For a long moment, Junseo didn't answer. He just looked at Marcus with the kind of flat, assessing stare that made grown men reconsider their life choices. Then he said, very quietly, "Junseo Kang." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. All the color drained from his face. His mouth opened, closed. He took an involuntary step backward. "Wait," Marcus said, his voice suddenly thin. "Kang, as in, yes." Junseo's expression didn't change. "Now walk away before you embarrass yourself further." Marcus looked at Nia one more time, something pleading and desperate in his eyes, then turned and disappeared into the crowd without another word. Nia stared after him, her heart pounding. What just happened? Junseo released her, stepping back to a polite distance. Your ex-husband recognized my name. Why would he recognize your name? Because I own half the commercial real estate in this city. He picked up his drink from the table, studying her with that same unsettling focus. And because men like him make it their business to know who holds power in Chicago. That should have been Nia's cue to thank him and leave. To go home, sleep off this insane night, and forget she'd ever danced with a man who made her ex-husband look like he'd seen a ghost. Instead, she heard herself say, "Buy me a drink." Junseo's expression shifted, not quite surprised, but close. You sure about that? No. Nia met his gaze. But I'm doing it anyway. They ended up in a quieter corner of the bar, away from the dance floor's chaos. Junseo ordered her something expensive, an amber that tasted like smoke and honey, then leaned back against the leather booth and watched her with that same unnerving attention. So, Nia said, after the whiskey had burned down her throat and settled warm in her chest. Commercial real estate mogul who makes grown men run scared. Should I be worried? Probably. That's not reassuring. I'm not trying to reassure you. He turned his glass slowly between his fingers. Tell me about the ex-husband. Why? Because you were ready to set him on fire 30 minutes ago, and I'm curious what kind of man earns that much rage. Nia laughed, but there was no humor in it. The kind who steals $40,000 and disappears before the divorce finalizes. Junseo went very still. He stole from you, cleaned out our joint savings. My lawyer said it wasn't worth pursuing. Nia took another drink, the whiskey making her reckless. So now I'm 3 months behind on rent, working doubles just to eat, and watching him live his best life with someone new. What's his full name? The question was casual, but something in Junseo's voice made the hair on Nia's arm stand up. Why? She asked slowly. Curiosity. You don't seem like the curious type. You seem like the type who asks questions because you're already planning something. His mouth curved. Smart. Marcus Reed, Nia said, because the whiskey and exhaustion and sheer recklessness made her stupid. Works in corporate finance, lives in a condo in River North that I'm pretty sure he bought with my money. Junseo committed the name to memory with a single nod. And what do you do, Nia? Trauma nurse, Chicago Memorial. How long? 4 years. Before that, I was in school, working part-time at an urgent care clinic. She studied him over the rim of her glass. Your turn. What do you actually do? I invest in property, businesses, people. He set his drink down. And I solve problems. What kind of problems? The kind most people are too afraid to touch. That should have sent her running. Instead, Nia felt herself leaning closer. Are you dangerous, Junseo Kang? Yes. No hesitation, no deflection, just the truth delivered with absolute calm. Then why are you talking to me? Nia asked. I'm nobody. An ER nurse drowning in debt. What could you possibly want from someone like me? Junseo was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes searching her face like he was trying to solve some complicated equation. Then he said, You're exhausted, angry, probably haven't eaten anything real in days, but you showed up tonight anyway because you're still fighting. He leaned forward, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. I respect people who fight even when they're losing. Nia's breath caught in her throat. I should go. You should. But he didn't move. Neither did she. The space between them felt charged, dangerous, like standing too close to a fire and not being sure if you wanted to step back or let yourself burn. Give me your phone, Junseo said finally. Nia handed it over without thinking. He typed something in, then handed it back. His number, saved under a single name, Kang. If you need something, he said, call me. I don't need anything from you. Not yet. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced efficiency. But you will. Then he walked away, disappearing into the crowd like smoke, leaving Nia sitting alone in the booth with an empty glass and a phone number that felt like a loaded gun. She should delete it. She should finish her drink, go home, sleep, and forget this entire night happened. Instead, she stared at the name on her screen and wondered what kind of man made Marcus Reed go pale with terror just by saying his name out loud. Sag. Nia made it home just after 2 a.m., collapsing into bed still wearing her dress and heels. Sleep came fast and dreamless, the kind of black void that swallowed her whole until her alarm dragged her back to consciousness 6 hours later. She had 4 hours before her next shift started. Time enough to shower, eat something resembling food, and pretend last night hadn't happened. Except when she checked her phone, there was a message from an unknown number. Coffee and breakfast delivered to Chicago Memorial Trauma Wing. Make sure your team eats something real today. No signature. But Nia knew exactly who'd sent it. She should have been angry, or uncomfortable, or worried that some wealthy stranger with a dangerous reputation was paying attention to where she worked and what she needed. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Seen. Wob. When Nia walked into the hospital later that afternoon, the Trauma Bay nurses' station had been transformed into a catering spread. Fresh coffee and proper thermal carafes, bagels, fruit, breakfast sandwiches still warm in their wrappers. "Where the hell did all this come from?" Lisa asked, already halfway through a croissant. Nia hesitated. No ideas. She worked her shift in a daze, half expecting Junseo to show up at some point or send another message, but her phone stayed silent. The food disappeared throughout the evening, her coworkers grateful and mystified, and by the time her shift ended at midnight, Nia had almost convinced herself the whole thing was a strange, forgettable anomaly. Then she walked outside and found a black town car idling at the curb. The back window rolled down. Junseo sat in the back seat, still wearing a suit, looking like he'd just left some business meeting or power dinner. "Get in," he said. "I don't think so. You haven't eaten anything except hospital vending machine food all day." Not a question, a statement. "There's a restaurant 3 blocks from here. Best Korean food in Chicago. They're holding a table." "How do you know I like Korean food?" "I don't, but if you don't, I'll take you somewhere else." Nia should have said no. Should have walked to the bus stop, gone home, kept her distance from whatever this was. Instead, she opened the car door and got in. The restaurant was small, intimate, the kind of place that didn't advertise because it didn't need to. The owner greeted Junseo by name, led them to a private table in the back, and brought food without asking. Banchan, galbijim, perfectly steamed rice. Nia ate like she was starving. Because she was. "When's the last time you had a real meal?" Junseo asked, watching her with that same quiet intensity. "I don't remember." "You're going to make yourself sick." "I'm fine." "You're not fine." He refilled her water glass. "You're running on adrenaline and stubbornness, and eventually you're going to collapse." "Is this why you brought me here?" Nia set down her chopsticks. "To lecture me about self-care?" "No. I brought you here because I wanted to see you again." The honesty caught her off guard. No games. No pretense. Just the truth delivered with the same calm certainty he seemed to approach everything. "Why?" Nia asked. "I don't know yet." They ate in silence for a while, the kind of comfortable quiet that shouldn't exist between strangers. Junseo asked about her work, not small-talk questions, but real ones. How long were her shifts? What cases stayed with her? Why emergency medicine instead of something easier? And Nia found herself answering, found herself talking about the night a 10-year-old came in with a bullet wound and died on the table while Nia held her hand, about the exhaustion that never fully went away, about Marcus and the nurse practitioner program she'd had to abandon because the money disappeared. $40,000, Junseo said quietly. Give or take. That's not a lot of money. It is when you don't have it. His jaw tightened. Marcus Reed works for Brennan Financial Group. Nia blinked. How do you know that? I know everything about anyone who crosses someone I'm interested in. He leaned back, his expression unreadable. He makes $200,000 a year. Lives in a condo he bought 6 months ago for $800,000 cash. The woman he's dating is named Amber Chen. She doesn't know he's still paying off debts from a gambling problem he developed 3 years into your marriage. The air left Nia's lungs. How? I make it my business to know. That's terrifying. Yes. No apology, no deflection. But now you know the truth. Marcus didn't just steal your money, Nia. He gambled it away, then covered his tracks and made you the villain in his own story. Nia closed her eyes, something hot and sharp twisting in her chest. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what kind of man you married, and because... He trailed off, something shifting in his expression. Because I think you're worth more than working yourself to death over someone else's mistakes. When Nia opened her eyes, Junseo was watching her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Yes. I don't even know you. Not yet. I should walk away." Probably. But she didn't. And when Junseo reached across the table and his fingers brushed against hers, Nia didn't pull back. She'd spent months barely surviving, drowning, invisible. For the first time in longer than she could remember, someone actually saw her, even if that someone was the most dangerous man she'd ever met. The days that followed blurred together in a way that felt both disorienting and inevitable, like watching yourself make decisions from outside your own body. Junseo didn't push. He didn't crowd her space or demand anything, but he was there, constant, deliberate, impossible to ignore. Coffee and breakfast appeared at the nurse's station every morning Nia worked. Not just cheap hospital cafeteria garbage, but real food from restaurants she couldn't afford. Her coworkers stopped asking where it came from after the first week, just accepted it as some mysterious hospital benefactor situation, and moved on. Nia knew better. She should have told him to stop, should have drawn a line. Instead, she found herself looking for his messages, the small ways he inserted himself into the margins of her life without ever asking for anything in return. "How was your shift?" "You need to sleep more than 4 hours. There's a car outside if you want to ride home." Simple, direct. Never demanding a response, but always there. And against every instinct screaming at her to keep her distance, Nia found herself responding. Found herself getting into that black town car at midnight when exhaustion made the idea of standing at a bus stop feel impossible. Found herself sitting across from Junseo in quiet restaurants, talking about things she'd never told anyone. The patients who haunted her, the medical school dreams she'd abandoned, the way Marcus had slowly convinced her over 5 years that she wasn't smart enough, pretty enough, worth enough to deserve better. "He was wrong," Junseo said one night, his voice flat and certain. About all of it. They were sitting in his car outside her apartment building, rain drumming against the roof. 2 a.m. The city washed gray and empty beyond the windshield. Nia stared at her hands. "You don't know me well enough to say that. I know you work 20-hour shifts and still show up. I know you put yourself through nursing school while married to a man who treated you like an accessory. I know you're drowning in debt that isn't your fault, and you haven't asked me for a single thing." He turned to face her fully. "That tells me everything I need to know." "You make it sound simple." "It is simple. You're extraordinary," and he was threatened by it. The words landed in her chest like a fist, not because they were flowery or romantic, but because Junseo said them the same way he said everything else, like they were facts, not opinions. "I should go inside," Nia said, but she didn't move. "You should." Neither of them moved. The space between them felt electric, dangerous. Nia could feel her pulse in her throat, her hands everywhere. She should thank him for the ride and walk away. Maintain distance, protect herself from whatever this was becoming. Instead, she heard herself say, "Do you want to come up?" Junseo's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Are you sure?" "No." She met his gaze. "But I'm asking anyway." He killed the engine. Nia's apartment was exactly what you'd expect from someone 3 months behind on rent. Small, cluttered with medical textbooks and unpaid bills, furniture that had seen better decades. She watched Junseo take it in without comment, his expensive suit absurdly out of place against her peeling wallpaper and secondhand couch. "I know it's not much," Nia started. "I don't care about your apartment." He was standing close now, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw. "I care why you invited me up here." "I don't know why." "Yes, you do." She did. The truth was written all over both of them. The way they'd been circling each other for 2 weeks. The late-night conversations that went deeper than strangers had any right to go. The magnetic pull that felt equal parts attraction and inevitability. "This is stupid," Nia whispered. "I don't even know what you do." "Not really. All I know is my ex-husband looked terrified when he heard your name." "And that doesn't scare you?" "Should. But it doesn't." "No?" Nia took a step closer. "It doesn't." Junseo's hand came up, his fingers brushing against her jaw with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything else about him. "If we do this," he said quietly, "it changes things." "I know. I'm not a good man, Nia." "I'm not asking you to be." Something cracked in his expression, control slipping just enough that she saw the want underneath, raw and barely contained. Then his mouth was on hers, hungry and demanding, his hands sliding into her hair as he backed her against the wall. Nia kissed him back with everything she had, months of exhaustion and anger and loneliness pouring out all at once. His body was solid against hers, one hand braced on the wall beside her head, while the other gripped her hip hard enough to leave marks. She didn't care. For the first time in years, she felt alive. They barely made it to the bedroom. Clothes hit the floor in a trail of expensive fabric and cheap cotton. Junseo's hands were everywhere, reverent and possessive at the same time, mapping her body like he was memorizing every scar, every curve, every place that made her breath catch. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her throat. "Don't." He didn't. Afterward, they lay tangled in her cheap sheets, both breathing hard, the city lights filtering through the blinds in pale stripes. Nia's head rested against Junseo's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. "This is insane," she said finally. "Yes. I barely know you. You know enough." She tilted her head to look at him. "Do I? Because all I really know is that you're rich, you scare the hell out of my ex-husband, and you send breakfast to trauma nurses." Junseo was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing absent patterns against her shoulder blade. "I was born in Busan," he said finally. "My father ran an import business that was a front for moving heroin through shipping containers. By the time I was 12, I'd watched him beat 3 men to death in our living room for stealing from him." Nia went very still. He wanted me to take over," Junseo continued, his voice flat, emotionless. "Said the business was my birthright. So I learned how to negotiate, how to intimidate, how to make problems disappear." He paused. "When I was 23, my father made a deal with a Russian syndicate that would have gotten half our people killed. I told him it was suicide. He called me weak." "What did you do?" "I killed him." The words hung in the darkness between them. Nia should have been horrified, should have pulled away, gotten dressed, kicked him out. Instead, she said, "Did you regret it?" "No." Junseo's hand tightened against her skin. "He was a monster. The world is better without him. And now? Now I run legitimate businesses, real estate, restaurants, investment firms. But the foundations were built on blood, Nia. I can't change that. And there are still people who remember what I'm capable of. Like Marcus. Like Marcus." Nia absorbed that, her mind working through implications she wasn't ready to fully examine. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you should know what you're getting into." He shifted, pulling back enough to meet her eyes. "I'm not safe. The life I built isn't safe. And if you stay close to me, eventually that danger will touch you too." "Is that supposed to scare me away?" "It should." "You keep saying that." Nia traced a scar along his ribs, pale and old. "But you're still here." "I'm selfish." His voice dropped to something rough, almost broken. "I know I should walk away from you. Let you build a normal life with someone who won't bring violence to your door. But I can't." "Then don't." Junseo's jaw tightened. "You don't understand what you're saying." "Maybe not, but I'm saying it anyway." She pressed her palm flat against his chest, feeling his heartbeat accelerate. "I've spent my whole life being careful, doing the right thing, following the rules. And where did it get me? Broke, alone, working myself to death while my ex-husband lives like a king on money he stole from me." Her voice cracked. "I'm tired of being invisible, Junseo. I'm tired of being safe." He stared at her for a long moment, something fierce and possessive burning in his eyes. Then he kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, and Nia let herself fall. Morning came too fast. Nia woke to pale sunlight and an empty bed, panic flaring in her chest before she heard movement in the kitchen. She pulled on a t-shirt and padded out to find Junseo fully dressed, his suit jacket draped over a chair, making coffee in her barely functional pot like he belonged there. "You should have woken me up," Nia said. "You needed sleep." He handed her a mug without asking how she took it. Black, 2 sugars. Somehow he already knew. I have a meeting at 8. What kind of meeting? The kind where I convince real estate developers that building affordable housing in Southside neighborhoods is more profitable than they think. Nia blinked. That's not what I expected you to say. Most people don't know what to expect from me. He checked his watch, something expensive and understated. I'll have a car pick you up for your shift. You don't have to do that. I know. He stepped closer, one hand sliding along her jaw. But I want to. Then he kissed her, brief, possessive, and walked out, leaving Nia standing in her kitchen with a coffee mug and the distinct feeling that her life had just tilted onto an axis she didn't fully understand. The next 3 weeks were a study in contradiction. During the day, Nia worked her shifts at Chicago Memorial, the same endless parade of gunshot wounds, overdoses, car accidents, the same exhaustion, the same debt collectors calling, the same eviction notice taped to her door that she couldn't bring herself to deal with. But the nights belonged to Junseo. He took her to restaurants where the waitstaff knew him by name and didn't bring menus because the chef just cooked. He drove her along Lake Michigan at 3 a.m. when neither of them could sleep. The city lights reflected in black water. He listened to her talk about patients and medical procedures with an attention that made her feel like the only person in the world. And slowly, carefully, he peeled back the layers of his own life. The security team that followed him everywhere, discreet but constant. The phone calls he took in rapid Korean, his voice dropping to something cold and commanding. The penthouse apartment overlooking the water where everything was sleek and expensive and utterly impersonal except for the shelf of books on Korean history and a single photograph of a woman who might have been his mother. She died when I was 16, Junseo said one night, catching Nia staring at the photo. Cancer. My father wouldn't pay for treatment because he said it made him look weak. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me that loyalty to blood means nothing if that blood is poison. They were lying on his couch, Nia's legs draped across his lap, the city spreading out beyond floor-to-ceiling windows. Junseo's hand rested on her ankle, his thumb tracing absent circles against her skin. Tell me something, Nia said. What do you actually want from this? From me? He was quiet for a long time. I don't know yet. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He met her eyes. I've spent 20 years building walls, Nia, making sure no one gets close enough to become a liability. And then you showed up looking like you wanted to burn your ex-husband alive, and something in me just... He trailed off. Recognized something. Recognized what? Someone who refuses to stay broken. Nia felt something crack open in her chest. You see me that way? I see you exhausted and angry, and still showing up every single day to save people who'll never know your name. I see you living in an apartment you can't afford because your ex-husband stole your future, and you still won't ask anyone for help. His grip tightened on her ankle. Yes, Nia, I see you that way. She didn't have words for that, so she kissed him instead, slow and deep, until they ended up tangled together on expensive leather with Chicago glittering beyond the windows. But reality had a way of crashing through even the most carefully constructed illusions. Nia was 3 weeks into whatever this thing with Junseo was when Marcus showed up outside Chicago Memorial at the end of her shift. She didn't see him at first, just walked out through the emergency room doors into the cold November air, exhausted and thinking about the leftover Thai food waiting in her fridge. Nia. She froze. Marcus was leaning against a black Mercedes that probably cost more than she made in 2 years, wearing a cashmere coat and the kind of casual arrogance that came from never facing consequences. What do you want? Nia's voice came out flat, dead. To talk. He pushed off the car, hands in his pockets. You've been avoiding my calls. I blocked your number 8 months ago. Right. Well, he had the audacity to look uncomfortable. I wanted to apologize. Nia actually laughed. You've got to be kidding. I'm serious. What I did, taking that money, it was wrong. I was in a bad place, and I made stupid decisions, and I'm sorry. You're sorry. Nia folded her arms across her chest, something cold and sharp coiling in her gut. You stole $40,000, Marcus. You destroyed my credit. I'm about to be evicted, and now you show up 8 months later and say you're sorry like that fixes anything? I know it doesn't fix anything, but I want to make it right. He pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. I can't give you all the money back right now, but this is 10,000. It's a start. Nia stared at the envelope like it was a live grenade. Why now? Because I've been thinking about what you said at the club, about how I treated you. He stepped closer. And you're right. I was an asshole. I took advantage of you, and I'm trying to be better. There was something off about this, something that didn't track. Marcus had spent their entire marriage dodging accountability, rewriting history to make himself the victim. He didn't just show up offering apologies and cash. What's really going on? Nia asked slowly. Marcus's expression flickered. Nothing's going on. I'm just... bullshit. She moved closer, studying his face. You're scared. You've been scared since you saw me with Jun-seo at the Vanguard. His jaw tightened. That's not... Don't lie to me, Marcus. You're terrified. Why? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Just stood there looking cornered and desperate, his polished exterior finally cracking. Do you have any idea who that man is? Marcus said finally, his voice dropping to something urgent and raw. Kang doesn't just own real estate, Nia. He runs half the organized crime networks in this city. The Korean syndicates, the drug trade, money laundering operations. People who cross him disappear. That's not true. Yes, it is. Marcus grabbed her arm. I work in finance. I see the accounts, the shell companies, the money moving through channels that don't exist on paper. Jun-seo Kang is one of the most dangerous men in Chicago, and you're sleeping with him. Nia yanked her arm free. You don't know what you're talking about. I know he's using you. I know that whatever you think this is, it's going to end badly. Like our marriage ended? That landed. Marcus flinched. You don't get to show up now and pretend you care about my safety, Nia said, her voice shaking with rage. You spent 5 years making me feel worthless. You stole from me. You abandoned me. And now because I'm finally with someone who treats me like I matter, you want to play concerned ex-husband? This isn't about us. Get the hell away from me, Marcus. She turned to walk away, but his voice stopped her. He's going to hurt you, Nia. Maybe not physically, but his world is violent, and you're going to get caught in the crossfire. And when that happens, don't say I didn't warn you. Nia didn't respond, just kept walking toward the bus stop, her hands shaking, Marcus's envelope still on the ground where she'd refused to take it. But his words followed her all the way home. She didn't tell Jun-seo about Marcus showing up. She should have. Should have mentioned it that night when he called to check on her, or the next evening when they met for dinner. But something stopped her. Maybe the fear that Marcus was right. Maybe the creeping suspicion that she'd let herself fall into something dangerous without fully understanding the cost. Instead, Nia buried herself in work, picked up extra shifts, avoided Jun-seo's calls just enough that he'd notice but not enough to make him push. It lasted 4 days. On the 5th night, Jun-seo showed up at her apartment unannounced. Nia opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, still wearing a suit, his expression unreadable. You've been avoiding me, he said. I've been working. Don't lie to me. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, his presence filling her tiny apartment. What happened? Nothing happened. Nia, he turned to face her fully. I've spent 2 decades reading people. I know when someone's lying, and I know when someone's scared, so tell me what happened. She should have kept her mouth shut, should have deflected, made excuses. Instead, the truth came pouring out. Marcus showed up outside the hospital, said he wanted to apologize, offered me money. The words tumbled over each other. But he wasn't really there to apologize. He was there to warn me about you. Jun-seo went very still. What did he say? That you're dangerous, that you run criminal operations, that people who cross you disappear. Nia met his eyes. Is he right? The silence stretched too long. Sit down, Jun-seo said finally. I don't want to sit down. I want you to answer the question. Then yes. His voice was flat, controlled. Marcus is right. About most of it. The air left Nia's lungs. I told you I built my empire on blood, Jun-seo continued. That wasn't metaphor, Nia. My father's organization imported drugs, ran protection rackets, controlled gambling operations across 3 states. When I took over, I inherited all of it. But you said you went legitimate. I did. Mostly. He moved closer. I sold off the drug operations, shut down the protection rackets, invested in real businesses. But you don't just walk away from that world cleanly. There are still connections, still favors owed, still people who remember what I'm capable of. Have you killed people? Yes. No hesitation, no sugarcoating. Nia felt like the floor was tilting beneath her. How many? Does the number matter? Yes. Junseo's jaw tightened. 7. 3, when I worked for my father. 4, after I took control. Why? Because they were threats. Because they would have killed me first. Because in that world, mercy is weakness, and weakness gets you buried. Nia pressed her hands against her face, trying to process information that felt impossible. This man, the one who sent her breakfast, who listened to her talk about patience, who touched her like she was precious, had killed 7 people. I should have told you sooner, Junseo said quietly. I know that, but I was afraid. Afraid of what? That I'd run? Yes. Maybe I should. Something cracked in his expression. Then run. Nia looked at him, really looked, saw the tension in his shoulders, the careful control in his posture, the fear he was trying to hide beneath that cold exterior. I don't want to run, she whispered. That's the problem. I should be terrified of you. I should be calling the police, but all I feel is… What? Safe. The word came out broken. You make me feel safe, and that doesn't make any sense. Junseo closed the distance between them, his hands framing her face. Because I would never hurt you. But you'd hurt other people. To protect you? Yes. Without hesitation. That should have horrified her, should have sent her running exactly like Marcus warned. Instead, Nia kissed him, desperate, searching, trying to reconcile the man she was falling for with the monster he'd just confessed to being. This is insane, she said against his mouth. I know. I should walk away. You should. But I can't. His arms tightened around her. Then don't. They stood there in her cramped apartment, holding each other like they were both drowning, while outside the city churned on, indifferent and vast. Nia had crossed a line she couldn't uncross, and somewhere deep down, she knew Marcus was right about one thing. This was going to end in blood. 2 days later, Nia came home from a brutal overnight shift to find Marcus sitting on the steps outside her building. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His expensive coat was rumpled, his eyes bloodshot and desperate. I need to talk to you, he said, standing as she approached. I have nothing to say to you. Please. He grabbed her arm. Just 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. Nia yanked free. Let go of me. Kang came to my office yesterday. That stopped her cold. What? He showed up during a partner meeting, walked right past security like he owned the building. Marcus's voice was shaking. He didn't threaten me, didn't say a word, just stood there while I gave my presentation, and everyone in that room knew exactly who he was and why he was there. He's sending a message, Nia. He's telling me that he can get to me anywhere, anytime, that I'm not safe. Marcus's hands were trembling. I need you to call him off. Call him off? Marcus, I didn't ask him to do anything. Then tell him to stop, please. I have a merger going through next month. If my partners think I'm connected to organized crime, it'll tank the whole deal. You stole $40,000 from me, Nia said, her voice cold. You destroyed my credit. You left me drowning, and now you want me to protect you? I know I screwed up. Screwed up? She laughed, but there was no humor in it. You didn't screw up, Marcus. You systematically destroyed me, and now that someone finally made you face consequences, you come crawling back asking for help? I'll give you the money back. All of it. I'll transfer it today. I don't want your money. Then what do you want? Nia stared at him, at the man she'd once loved, who'd promised her a future and then burned it all down. The man who'd made her feel small and worthless and invisible for 5 years. I want you to feel what I felt, she said quietly. I want you to know what it's like to be afraid, to not know if you'll have a roof over your head next month, to work yourself to death and still come up short. Marcus's face went pale. You don't mean that, don't I? She stepped closer. You spent our entire marriage telling me I wasn't enough, that I was too loud, too demanding, too difficult. You made me believe I deserved nothing better, and now someone finally sees me as worthy and you can't stand it. That's not— Go home, Marcus. Figure out your own problems. I'm done saving you. She pushed past him toward her building, but his voice followed her. He's gonna ruin you, Nia. You think you matter to him, but you're just a distraction. A way to pass time until something more interesting comes along. And when he's done, you'll be the one left picking up the pieces. Nia didn't respond, but as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, Marcus's words echoed in her head, mixing with everything Junseo had confessed, until she couldn't tell truth from manipulation anymore. That night, Junseo picked her up in his town car like he always did. But instead of taking her to dinner or back to his penthouse, he drove to a warehouse on the outskirts of the industrial district, the kind of location that only appeared in movies right before something terrible happened. "Where are we?" Nia asked as the car stopped. "Somewhere I need you to see." Junseo opened his door. "Come on." Every instinct screamed at her to stay in the car, to demand he take her home. But she followed anyway, stepping out into cold wind that smelled like rust and river water. The warehouse was massive and mostly empty, except for a few men standing guard near the entrance. They nodded to Junseo as he passed, their eyes sliding over Nia with careful neutrality. Inside, the space had been converted into something between an office and a fortress. Industrial lighting, concrete floors, expensive furniture that looked absurdly out of place. And in the center of the room, tied to a chair with blood dripping from his split lip, was a man Nia had never seen before. She stopped dead. "What is this?" "This," Junseo said, his voice perfectly calm, "is the man who was following you for the past week." Nia's blood went cold. "What?" "Someone hired him to track your movements, where you work, where you live, who you talk to." Junseo walked closer to the bound man, his hands in his pockets. "I want to know who." The man spat blood onto the concrete. "I don't know. Job came through an encrypted channel. Cash deposit, no contact." "Try again." Junseo's voice didn't rise, but something in his tone made the temperature drop. "I'm telling you the truth, man. I got paid to follow her. That's it. No names, no—" Junseo moved so fast Nia barely saw it. One second he was standing still, the next his fist connected with the man's jaw with a crack that echoed through the warehouse. "Junseo!" Nia's voice came out strangled. He turned to face her, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was no warmth in his eyes. Just cold, brutal focus. "Go wait in the car," he said. "No. This isn't something you need to see. If it involves me, then yes, I do." They stared at each other across the warehouse floor, some fundamental line being drawn between them. Finally, Junseo turned back to the bleeding man. "I'll ask one more time. Who hired you?" "I don't— Marcus Reed." The name came from one of the guards near the door. "We traced the encrypted payment. It originated from an account registered to his girlfriend." Nia felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. Marcus had hired someone to follow her. "Why?" she whispered. "Because he wanted leverage," Junseo said, his voice flat. "Information he could use to scare you away from me, or to sell to someone else." The man in the chair was shaking now, blood running down his chin. "I didn't know what he was planning. I swear. I was just supposed to document her routine. Get him out of here," Junseo said to his guards. "Make sure he understands what happens if he accepts another job involving Nia Hollowell." The guards moved immediately, cutting the man free and dragging him toward a side exit. Then it was just Nia and Junseo, and the echo of violence hanging in the air between them. "You brought me here to watch you beat someone," Nia said, her voice hollow. "I brought you here so you'd understand." He walked toward her slowly. "This is who I am, Nia. This is what I do when someone threatens what's mine, and you need to decide if you can live with that." "What if I can't?" "Then I'll take you home and you'll never see me again." The warehouse felt too big suddenly, too empty. Nia could still hear the crack of Junseo's fist against bone, could still see the cold precision in his movements. He'd hurt that man without hesitation. Would hurt Marcus if she asked, would burn down the entire city if he thought it would keep her safe. "Marcus came to see me," Nia said finally. "Said you showed up at his office, that you're trying to intimidate him." I am. Why? Because he stole from you. Because he's still trying to control you. Because he hired someone to follow you like your property. He can monitor. Junseo's jaw tightened. And because the idea of him breathing the same air as you makes me want to do things that would put me back in the world I've spent 10 years trying to leave. Nia closed her eyes. This is insane. I know. I should walk away. You should. But if I do, she opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. If I walk away, what happens to Marcus? Junseo was quiet for a long moment. Nothing. If you leave, I'll have no reason to keep him on my radar. And if I stay, then he returns every penny he stole, publicly admits to fraud, and spends the rest of his life knowing that the only reason he's still breathing is because you chose mercy. It was a test. Nia understood that. Junseo was forcing her to see exactly who he was, what he was capable of, and make a choice with full knowledge of the consequences. She should have walked away, should have called the police, filed a report, gotten as far from this man and his violence as humanly possible. Instead, she closed the distance between them and said, I want the money back, all of it, and I want him to know it came from you. Something fierce and possessive flared in Junseo's eyes. You're sure? No. Her hands were shaking. But I'm done being the one who suffers while he walks away clean. Junseo pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her like he could shield her from the choice she'd just made. There's no going back from this, he said against her hair. I know. You're mine now, in every way that matters. I know. And standing in that warehouse with blood still drying on the concrete and violence hanging in the air like smoke, Nia realized she'd finally crossed the line Marcus had warned her about. She wasn't just sleeping with a dangerous man anymore. She was becoming dangerous herself. Marcus showed up at Nia's apartment 72 hours later carrying a briefcase that looked like it weighed more than his conscience ever had. His hands were shaking. Nia opened the door and didn't say a word, just stepped aside to let him in. Behind her, Junseo sat on her second-hand couch like he owned the entire building, one ankle crossed over his knee, his expression completely neutral. Marcus froze when he saw him. Close the door, Junseo said quietly. Marcus obeyed. The click of the lock sounded like a gunshot in the small apartment. Put the briefcase on the table, Junseo continued, still not moving from the couch. Marcus did. His hands fumbled with the latches, sweat already visible on his forehead despite the November cold seeping through the windows. When the case opened, Nia saw stacks of cash bundled with paper bands, neat, organized, exactly $40,000. It's all there, Marcus said, his voice hoarse. Every penny. You can count it. Nia stared at the money, at the physical representation of 5 years of manipulation and theft and gaslighting. It looked smaller than she'd imagined, less significant. Where did you get it? She asked. I liquidated some investments, borrowed from my parents. It doesn't matter. Marcus wouldn't look at her, his eyes fixed on the floor. It's yours. It was always yours. Look at her when you talk to her, Junseo said. Marcus's head snapped up. His eyes met Nia's, and she saw something she'd never seen before in all their years together. Genuine fear. I'm sorry, Marcus whispered, for everything. For stealing from you. For making you feel worthless. For, his voice cracked, for destroying the best thing that ever happened to me. Nia wanted to feel vindicated, wanted this moment to erase the years of pain and self-doubt he'd planted in her chest. Instead, she just felt hollow. Sign the papers, Junseo said, gesturing to a manila folder on the coffee table. Legal declaration admitting to fraud and financial misconduct during the divorce proceedings. Binding arbitration waiving any future claims against Nia Hollowell. Marcus picked up the folder with trembling hands, flipped through the pages without really reading them. If I sign this, my career is over. The partners will force me out. Then you should have thought of that before you stole from your wife, Junseo said, his tone conversational, almost pleasant. Sign the papers or I make sure every financial institution in Chicago knows exactly what kind of man you are. You can't. I can. Junseo leaned forward slightly. I've already compiled the evidence. Bank transfers, shell company registrations, emails you thought were deleted. One phone call and your professional reputation becomes a cautionary tale. Marcus looked at Nia, something desperate and pleading in his expression. You're really going to let him do this? You did this, Nia said. Not him, not me, you. Marcus's shoulders sagged. He picked up the pen, hesitated for just a moment, then signed each page with quick, jerky movements like he was afraid his nerve would fail if he slowed down. When he finished, Junso stood and collected the folder, leafing through to verify each signature. You can go now. Marcus didn't move, just stood there looking at Nia with something that might have been regret or might have been self-pity. She couldn't tell anymore and didn't care to figure it out. I loved you, he said finally. I know you don't believe that, but I did. No, you didn't. Nia's voice came out steady, certain. You loved the idea of me, the nurse wife who'd work herself to death while you played corporate hotshot, but the real me, the one with ambitions and opinions and self-respect. You couldn't stand her. Marcus flinched like she'd hit him. Get out, Nia said. He left without another word, the door closing behind him with a soft click that felt like the final punctuation on a chapter of her life she'd never have to read again. Nia stood in the center of her apartment, staring at the briefcase full of cash and waited to feel something. Relief, triumph, closure. Instead, she just felt tired. Are you okay? Junso asked from behind her. I don't know. She turned to face him. I thought getting the money back would fix something, make me whole again, but it just feels like revenge doesn't actually heal anything? Yeah. Junseo crossed the room and pulled her against him, his arms solid and steady. Revenge never does, but justice helps. And this was justice. Nia buried her face against his chest, breathing in the scent of his cologne and the underlying warmth of his skin. What happens now? Now you use that money to re-enroll in your nurse practitioner program. Build the life you should have had 5 years ago. His hand came up to cradle the back of her head. And I make sure nothing ever threatens you again. It should have felt romantic, protective. Instead, something cold slithered down Nia's spine. Junseo, she said carefully, pulling back to look at him. What did you mean when you said you'd make sure nothing threatens me? His expression didn't change. Exactly what I said. That's not an answer. It's the only one you need. The way he said it, calm, absolute, final, made her stomach twist. You're going to have someone watch me, aren't you? Follow me. Make sure I'm safe. Yes, I don't want that. I know. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. But it's not negotiable. Excuse me? You're with me now, Nia. That makes you a target for anyone who wants to hurt me. So yes, you'll have security. Discreet, professional, invisible most of the time. But they'll be there. And if I say no, then I'll do it anyway. No apology, no compromise. I've lost people I cared about because I wasn't careful enough. I won't make that mistake with you. Nia took a step back, something sharp and uncomfortable twisting in her chest. You don't own me. I never said I did. But you're making decisions about my life without asking. I'm keeping you alive. His voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath now. There's a difference. Is there? Nia heard her voice rising and couldn't stop it. Because from where I'm standing, you're starting to sound a lot like Marcus. Making choices for me because you think you know better. Controlling my life because you think I can't handle it myself. Junseo's jaw tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? You brought me to a warehouse to watch you beat a man. You forced Marcus to sign legal documents under threat of destroying his career. And now you're telling me I don't have a choice about being followed everywhere I go. She crossed her arms. How is that different from control? Because I'm doing it to protect you, not diminish you. Marcus would have said the same thing. The words hung in the air between them like poison. Junseo stared at her for a long moment, something dangerous flickering behind his eyes. Then he picked up his jacket from the chair and headed toward the door. Where are you going? Nia asked. Giving you space to figure out if you actually want this. He stopped with his hand on the doorknob. Because I can't be with someone who compares me to the man who abused her every time I try to keep her safe. Junseo said. But he was already gone, the door closing behind him with a finality that made Nia's chest ache. She stood alone in her apartment, surrounded by $40,000 in cash, and the slowly dawning realization that she'd just pushed away the first person in years who'd made her feel like she mattered. Nia didn't hear from Junseo for 3 days. No calls, no messages, no coffee deliveries at the hospital. The silence was deafening. She threw herself into work, picking up extra shifts until exhaustion became a physical presence in her bones. The money sat in her apartment untouched, still in the briefcase, like somehow moving it would make the fight with Junseo real and permanent. On the fourth day, Nia's friend Lisa cornered her in the break room. "Okay, what's going on?" Lisa demanded, blocking the door with her body. "You've been a zombie for 3 days, you're working doubles back to back, and you look like you haven't slept since last Tuesday." "I'm fine." "Bullshit. Is this about that guy? The one who's been sending breakfast?" Nia's throat tightened. "We had a fight." "About what?" "He wants to protect me, and I accused him of being controlling." Lisa was quiet for a moment, studying her face. "Was he being controlling?" "I don't know." Nia pressed her palms against her eyes. "He wanted to assign security to follow me around, said I'm a target because of who he is, and I freaked out, told him he was acting like my ex-husband." "Ouch." "Yeah." "But is he?" Lisa asked. "Acting like your ex?" "I don't know. Marcus used to make all my decisions too. But with him it always felt like he was trying to make me smaller, easier to manage. With Junseo it feels like he's trying to keep you alive?" Nia dropped her hands. "You think I overreacted? I think you've been burned before, and you're scared of getting burned again. But there's a difference between a man who controls you to feed his ego and a man who protects you because he's terrified of losing you." Lisa squeezed her shoulder. "Figure out which one he is before you throw away something that might actually be good." Before Nia could respond, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text was simple. "We need to talk. Come to the address below. Come alone. An address in Chinatown. A restaurant called Golden Phoenix." Nia's blood went cold. She didn't recognize the number, but something in her gut said this wasn't Junseo. "I have to go," she told Lisa. "Your shift doesn't end for 2 hours." But Nia was already moving, grabbing her coat and pushing through the emergency room doors into the cold afternoon air. The Golden Phoenix was the kind of restaurant that catered to people who wanted privacy. Dark booths, heavy curtains, waitstaff who knew how to be invisible. Nia gave her name at the host stand and was immediately led to a private room in the back. A man sat waiting at the table. He was older than Junseo, maybe mid-50s, with sharp features and silver threading through his black hair. Expensive suit, gold watch, the kind of stillness that suggested violence lived just beneath the surface. "Ms. Hollowell," he said in accented English, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Thank you for coming. My name is Yoon Tae Min." Nia didn't sit. "Who are you?" "A business associate of Junseo Kang. Please sit. I promise you're in no danger." That's not reassuring. Nevertheless, it's true. He poured tea into 2 cups with practiced elegance. "I asked you here because I thought you deserved to know certain truths before you continue your relationship with Junseo." "What kind of truths?" "The kind he won't tell you himself." Taemin gestured again to the empty chair. "Sit, Ms. Hollowell. What I have to say will take some time." Against every instinct screaming at her to leave, Nia sat. Taemin slid a photograph across the table. It showed Junseo standing outside a warehouse, not the one where he'd beaten Marcus's private investigator, but somewhere else. Industrial. Isolated. Beside him stood 3 men, all Korean, all carrying weapons visible even in the grainy photo. "This was taken 6 months ago," Taemin said, "in Seoul. Junseo was meeting with the leadership of the Baek-do faction, one of the largest criminal organizations in East Asia." Nia's stomach dropped. "He told me he went legitimate, that he left that world behind." "Did he?" Taemin pulled out another photo. This one showed money being transferred between briefcases. "Junseo has been laundering funds through his real estate holdings for the past 3 years. Property purchases in Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, all fronts for moving dirty money." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because Junseo is playing a dangerous game, and you've become leverage." Taemin's voice was gentle, almost sympathetic. "There are people in Seoul who believe he's becoming weak, that his attachment to you is making him vulnerable. and they're considering whether removing you might remind him of his priorities. The room felt too small suddenly, the air too thin. "You're lying," Nia said, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. "I wish I were." He slid another photograph across the table. This one showed Nia herself, walking out of Chicago Memorial, climbing into Junseo's town car, entering his penthouse building. "These were taken by the Bagdu faction. They've been watching you for weeks." Nia's hands started shaking. What do they want? They want Junseo to remember that love is a liability, that emotional attachments make a man soft. So they're going to force him to choose, you or his empire. And if he chooses me, then they'll kill him and install someone more ruthless in his place. Taemin's expression was grave. And if he chooses his empire, they'll kill you to prove the point. Nia couldn't breathe. The walls were closing in. The photographs scattered across the table like evidence of her own stupidity. "Why are you warning me?" she asked. "What do you get out of this? I served Junseo's father for 20 years. Watched him build an empire through blood and fear. And I watched Junseo try to be different, try to find a way out of the violence." Taemin's voice softened. "He cares about you, Ms. Hollowell, more than I've seen him care about anyone. But that care is going to get you both killed, unless you walk away now." "Walk away." Nia's laugh came out strangled. "Just like that. Disappear. Leave Chicago. I can help you relocate, give you enough money to start over somewhere safe. But you have to do it now, before the Baekdu faction makes their move." Nia stared at the photographs, at the evidence of a world she'd only glimpsed the edges of. Marcus had warned her. Lisa had warned her. And she'd ignored them all because Junseo made her feel seen, protected, worthy. But maybe Marcus had been right all along. Maybe she was just collateral damage waiting to happen. "How long do I have?" Nia asked quietly. 2 days. Maybe 3. Taemin pulled a business card from his jacket. "This number reaches me directly. When you're ready, call. I'll have everything arranged." Nia took the card with numb fingers. She walked out of the Golden Phoenix in a daze, the afternoon light harsh after the restaurant's darkness. Her phone buzzed, Junseo's name flashing across the screen. She let it go to voicemail. Then she went home, locked her door, and finally let herself cry. Nia called in sick to work that night. The first time in 4 years she'd missed a shift for anything other than physical illness. She sat on her couch with the lights off, Taemin's business card in one hand and her phone in the other, trying to figure out what the hell to do. Leave Chicago, start over, disappear. It was the smart choice, the safe choice. But it meant never seeing Junseo again. Her phone rang. "Junseo, again." This time she answered. "Where have you been?" His voice was tight with worry. "I've been calling for hours. I needed space. Naya, I met with someone today." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "Yoon Tae-min, he said he worked for your father." The silence on the other end was absolute. "What did he tell you?" Junseo's voice had gone completely flat. "That you're still running criminal operations. That you're laundering money through real estate. That there are people in Seoul who want me dead because I make you weak." Her voice cracked. "Is it true?" "Where are you?" "My apartment." "Stay there. Lock the door. Don't let anyone in except me." He was already moving. She could hear it in the background. Footsteps, car doors, urgent Korean being spoken to someone else. "I'm 10 minutes away." "Junseo, shit. Everything Taemin told you is a lie. I'll explain when I get there, but you need to trust me. Lock the door. Now." The line went dead. Nia stood frozen in her apartment, Taemin's warnings echoing in her head, Junseo's urgency twisting her gut into knots. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, deliberate. They stopped outside her door. Nia's heart hammered against her ribs. She moved toward the window, thinking maybe she could climb down the fire escape, but the footsteps started again. Not walking away, but moving purposefully toward the door. The lock clicked. Someone had a key. The door opened and a man stepped inside. Not Junseo, not Taemin, someone else. Korean, mid-30s, with dead eyes and a gun in his hand. "Miss Hollowell," he said in perfect English, "you're going to come with me. Get out of my apartment." He raised the gun. This doesn't have to be difficult. Nia's hands were shaking so hard she could barely breathe. Junso is on his way. That's why we're leaving now. He stepped closer. Walk out the door quietly, or I put a bullet in your leg and carry you. Your choice. Nia thought about screaming, about running, about fighting, but the gun was steady in his hand and his expression said he'd done this 1,000 times before. So she walked. They made it 3 steps into the hallway before Junso appeared at the top of the stairs. He moved like violence given form, fast, precise, lethal. The gunman barely had time to turn before Junso was on him, one hand slamming the gun toward the floor while the other connected with the man's throat. The gun went off. The sound was deafening in the narrow hallway, plaster exploding from the wall 6 inches from Nia's head. Then Junso had the man on the ground, his knee pressed against the gunman's spine, the weapon now in Junseo's hand pointed at the back of the man's skull. Who sent you? Junseo's voice was perfectly calm. Fuck you. Junseo pressed the gun harder against the man's head. Who sent you? Junseo, don't! Nia started, but the gunman interrupted. Taemin, he gasped out. Taemin sent me. Said you were getting weak. Said someone needed to remind you what happens when you put a woman before the family. Junseo went very still. Taemin set this up? Nia's voice was barely a whisper. The meeting, the photographs, the warnings, all of it. He wanted you scared. The gunman's face was pressed against the floor, blood seeping from his nose. Wanted you to run so Kang would learn his lesson, but you didn't run fast enough. Junseo looked up at Nia, and the expression on his face was the most terrifying thing she'd ever seen. Not anger, not violence, but absolute murderous certainty. Get in your apartment, he said quietly. What are you going to do? What I should have done years ago. Junseo. Now, Nia. She backed into her apartment, her legs shaking, and watched as Junseo hauled the gunman to his feet and dragged him toward the stairs. 2 more men appeared, guards Nia hadn't seen, had never noticed watching the building. They took the gunman away. Junseo came back inside and locked the door behind him. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Taemin worked for your father, Nia said finally, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Why would he try to hurt me? Because he never forgave me for killing his best friend. Junseo's voice was hollow. My father and Taemin were closer than brothers. When I took over, I thought Taemin would understand, that he'd see my father was leading us all to destruction. But he just waited, played loyal, and now he's making his move. By using me. By using you. He moved closer, his hands framing her face. I should have seen this coming. Should have protected you better. You can't protect me from everything. I can try. His thumb traced her cheekbone. But you were right. About the control. About me making decisions for you. I've spent so long operating alone, trusting no one, that I forgot what partnership actually looks like. Nia closed her eyes, exhaustion and adrenaline crashing over her in waves. What happens now? Now we end this. His voice dropped to something cold and final. Taemin declared war, so I'm going to finish it. How? The way wars always end in my world. With blood. The certainty in his voice should have terrified her. Instead, Nia found herself asking, what do you need from me? Junseo pulled back to look at her, something like surprise flickering across his features. You want to help? He tried to kill me. Used me as bait to hurt you, so yes. Her hands were still shaking, but her voice came out steady. Tell me what you need. For the first time since she'd met him, Junseo looked uncertain. This isn't your fight. The hell it isn't. I'm the reason he came after you. No. His grip tightened. He came after you because I care about you, because he saw that as weakness. But he's wrong. Something fierce and possessive burned in his eyes. You're not my weakness, Nia. You're the only thing that makes me want to be more than what my father built. And if Taemin thinks he can use that against me, then I'll show him exactly what I'm capable of when someone threatens what's mine. The words should have scared her, should have sent her running. Instead, Nia felt something shift inside her chest, a line being crossed that she could never uncross. Then let's end this, she said. Junseo stared at her for a long moment, searching her face for hesitation or fear. He found none. Pack a bag, he said finally. You're staying with me until this is over. And Nia, he caught her hand. Once we start this, there's no walking away. You'll be part of my world completely. The violence, the danger, all of it. You need to understand that. I understand. Do you? His voice was raw. Because there are things I'm going to have to do. Things you might not be able to forgive. And I need to know if you can live with that. Nia thought about Marcus, about Taemin, about the gunman who'd walked into her apartment ready to put a bullet in her leg. She thought about the woman she'd been 6 months ago, invisible, exhausted, drowning in debt and self-doubt. And she thought about the woman she was becoming, harder, sharper, unafraid. I can live with it, she said. Junso kissed her then, desperate and claiming, and Nia kissed him back, knowing that whatever came next would redefine everything she thought she knew about herself, because she'd finally crossed the line from victim to something else entirely. And there was no going back. Junseo's penthouse felt different now that Nia understood what it really was. Not just a luxury apartment, but a fortress. Every window bulletproof, every entrance monitored by cameras she'd never noticed, guards stationed on rotation 24 hours a day. She'd been here 3 days and hadn't left once. The first night, Junso had made calls in rapid Korean while Nia sat on the leather couch trying to process the fact that someone had walked into her apartment with a gun. The second night, men arrived in expensive suits carrying briefcases she suspected didn't contain legal documents. Junso had disappeared into his office for 6 hours while Nia paced the living room, watching the city lights blur through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Now it was the third night, and the tension in the penthouse had reached a breaking point. I need you to listen very carefully, Junso said, standing in front of her with his arms crossed, his expression harder than she'd ever seen it. Tomorrow night, Taemin is meeting with the Baekdu leadership at a warehouse in the Port District. It's supposed to be a negotiation about territory and profit sharing, but what he doesn't know is that I've already made a deal with the Baekdu second-in-command. What kind of deal? The kind where Taemin walks into that warehouse and doesn't walk out. Nia's stomach twisted. You're going to kill him. I'm going to remove a threat. His voice was flat, matter of fact. Taemin tried to have you kidnapped, sent a gunman to your apartment. He's made it clear he won't stop until either I'm dead or you're used as leverage to destroy me. So yes, I'm going to kill him. And you want me to what? Sit here and wait? I want you safe. I am safe. You have armed guards in every hallway. Nia stood, moving closer to him. What you actually want is for me to stay ignorant of what you're doing. That's not... Don't lie to me. Her voice cracked. You said we were partners, that this was my fight too, but now you're shutting me out. Junseo's jaw tightened. What do you want from me, Nia? You want to watch me put a bullet in Taemin's head? You want that image burned into your memory forever? I want to know I'm not just some delicate thing you're trying to protect while you handle the real work. You're a trauma nurse, not an enforcer. And you're a real estate developer, not a killer, but we both know that's bullshit. She grabbed his arm. I'm not asking to pull the trigger. I'm asking to be there, to understand what this world actually looks like, instead of waiting here like some 1950s housewife while you go to war. Junseo stared at her, something conflicted warring in his expression. If you come tomorrow, you can't unsee what happens. You can't unknow what I'm capable of. And if that changes how you look at me, it won't. You don't know that. Then let me find out. Nia stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating off him. I've already crossed the line, Junseo. I watched you beat a man in a warehouse. I told you to make Marcus pay. I'm not innocent anymore, so stop treating me like I am. For a long moment, he didn't respond, just studied her face like he was trying to memorize every detail. You'll do exactly what I tell you, he said finally. No exceptions. If I say run, you run. If I say hide, you hide. Understood? Understood. And Nia, his hand came up to cup her jaw. If something goes wrong, if this turns into a firefight, you get to the car and you drive. You don't wait for me. You don't try to help. You survive. Promise me. I promise. He kissed her then, hard and desperate, like he was already saying goodbye. Olt. The warehouse sat at the edge of the industrial port district, surrounded by shipping containers and skeletal cranes that looked like prehistoric creatures in the darkness. Nia could smell oil and rust in the lake beyond, black water lapping against concrete. They'd driven here in a convoy, 3 SUVs with tinted windows, armed men she recognized from the penthouse, and Junseo sitting beside her in the back seat wearing all black and an expression that made her skin prickle. "Stay in the car until I call you," he said as they pulled up to the warehouse entrance. "My men will be watching. You'll be safe. How long? However long it takes." Then he was gone, disappearing into the warehouse with 4 guards flanking him, and Naya was alone with the driver, a silent Korean man in his 50s who hadn't said a word the entire drive. She watched the warehouse entrance, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. Minutes crawled by. 5, 10, 15. Then gunfire erupted inside the building. The driver immediately started the engine, his hand reaching for the gear shift, but Nia grabbed his wrist. "Wait! Ms. Hollowell, we have orders." "I said wait!" More gunfire, shouting in Korean, the sound of something heavy crashing to the ground. Nia's hands were shaking. Every instinct screamed at her to follow Junseo's orders, to let the driver take her somewhere safe while whatever was happening inside played out without her. But she thought about Tae-min's photographs, about the gunman in her hallway, about every moment in her life when she'd been told to wait, to trust someone else to handle things, to be good and quiet and invisible. She opened the car door. "Ms. Hollowell, no!" Nia was already running toward the warehouse, her feet pounding against cracked asphalt. She heard the driver shouting behind her but didn't stop, didn't slow, just kept moving until she reached the side entrance. The door was ajar. Blood smeared across the handle. Inside, the warehouse was chaos. Bodies on the ground. Some moving, some not. Shipping containers created a maze of shadows and blind corners. Muzzle flashes lit up the darkness like strobe lights, each gunshot deafening in the enclosed space. Nia pressed herself against a container, trying to orient herself, trying to find Junseo in the madness. Then she heard his voice, cold and commanding, cutting through the noise. "Tae-min, it's over. Your men are dead or running. Baekdu wants nothing to do with this coup. You're alone." Nia crept forward, following the sound, staying low and close to the containers. She found them in the center of the warehouse, a cleared space where Junseo stood with a gun aimed at Tae-min, who knelt on the concrete with blood running from a wound in his shoulder. 2 of Junseo's guards flanked him, their weapons trained on the older man. "You think killing me changes anything?" Tae-min's voice was hoarse, defiant. "The Baekdu leadership only agreed to this because you paid them. The moment your money runs out, they'll come for you. And that nurse you're so obsessed with, she'll be the first casualty." "Wrong." Junseo's finger tightened on the trigger. "She's the reason I'm still standing here instead of letting you destroy everything I've built. She's the reason I finally understand what my father never did, that loyalty earned is stronger than loyalty taken by force. Your father would be disgusted." "My father was a monster." Junseo's voice dropped to something lethal. "And you helped him become one, so now you pay for that." Nia saw it happening in slow motion. Junseo's finger moving, Tae-min's eyes going wide, the moment before the bullet would end everything. Then movement caught her peripheral vision. A figure emerging from behind a container to Junseo's left, a gun rising, aiming not at Junseo but at his guards. Nia didn't think, just moved. She grabbed a metal pipe lying near the container and swung it with everything she had, connecting with the gunman's wrist just as he fired. The shot went wild, sparking off metal, and the gun clattered to the ground. The man turned on her, rage and surprise warring on his face. Junseo pivoted immediately, his weapon now trained on the new threat, but the man was faster. He lunged at Nia, one hand catching her throat, slamming her back against the shipping container hard enough to knock the air from her lungs. "You stupid bitch!" Then Junseo was there, moving with terrifying speed. He slammed the gun against the man's temple, once, twice, until the grip on Nia's throat released and she collapsed to her knees gasping. Junseo dragged the man away from her and put 2 bullets in his chest without hesitation. The warehouse fell silent except for Nia's ragged breathing. Junseo turned to her and the expression on his face was something between fury and terror. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Saving your life." Her voice came out strangled, her throat already bruising. "I told you to stay in the car. He was going to kill your guards. You wouldn't have seen him in time. So you thought you'd what? Hit him with a pipe? Junseo grabbed her shoulders, his hands shaking. He could have shot you, could have broken your neck. You could be dead right now. But I'm not. That's not the point. A gunshot cracked through the air. Junseo's body jerked. His eyes went wide. Blood bloomed across his shoulder, dark and spreading fast. Nia screamed. Yeah. Taemin was on his feet, a small pistol in his hand that he must have pulled from an ankle holster, his face twisted with rage and satisfaction. You took everything from me, Taemin said, aiming for a second shot. So I take everything from you. But before he could fire, one of Junseo's guards put 3 bullets in his chest. Taemin dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Junseo collapsed to one knee, his hand pressed against the wound, blood seeping between his fingers. His face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead. Junseo! Nia was on him immediately, her hands replacing his, applying pressure to the wound. Years of emergency room training kicked in automatically. I need something to stop the bleeding, a shirt, a towel, anything. One of the guards stripped off his jacket, handing it to her. Nia wadded the fabric against the wound, her hands steady, despite the panic clawing at her chest. The bullet went through. That's good. But you're losing a lot of blood. We need to get you to a hospital. No hospitals. Junseo's voice was weak but firm. Too many questions. You need surgery. I have a doctor, private. He'll come to the penthouse. He tried to stand and his legs buckled. 2 guards caught him before he hit the ground. Get him to the car, Nia ordered, her voice taking on the same commanding tone she used in trauma bays. Now. And someone call his doctor. Tell them it's a through-and-through gunshot wound to the left shoulder, significant blood loss, patient is conscious and responsive, but going into shock. The guards moved immediately, responding to her authority without question. They half-carried Junseo to the SUV while Nia kept pressure on the wound, her scrubs. She'd changed before they left. Some instinct telling her she might need to be ready for medical work, already soaked with his blood. The drive back to the penthouse was the longest 20 minutes of Nia's life. Junseo's head rested against her shoulder, his breathing shallow, his skin clammy. She kept talking to him, forcing him to stay conscious. Tell me about Busan, she said. What was it like growing up there? Loud. His voice was barely a whisper. Always loud. The port, the markets, people everywhere. What else? My mother used to take me to the beach, before she got sick. His eyes drifted closed. Hey, stay with me. Nia squeezed his hand hard enough to hurt. What did you do at the beach? Built sandcastles. She said I was going to be an architect. A weak laugh. Guess she was wrong. She wasn't wrong. You built an empire. On blood. On survival. Nia pressed her forehead against his. And you're going to keep surviving. You hear me? You don't get to die in the back of a car after everything we've been through. Bossy. Damn right. By the time they reached the penthouse, the doctor was already there. A Korean man in his 60s with steady hands and a medical bag that looked like it belonged in a military field hospital. He took one look at Junseo and immediately started barking orders. They converted the dining room into an operating theater. Nia assisted, falling into the familiar rhythm of medical procedures, monitoring vitals, handing over instruments, keeping pressure on bleeders while the doctor worked. It took 2 hours to remove bone fragments, repair the damage, and close the wound. When it was finally over, Junseo was unconscious on the table, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths, color slowly returning to his face. He'll live, the doctor said, stripping off his gloves. But he needs rest, no physical activity for at least 2 weeks. I'll make sure of it, Nia said. The doctor studied her, taking in her blood-soaked scrubs, the bruises already darkening on her throat. You're a nurse. Trauma. Chicago Memorial. Then you know how lucky he is. 5 minutes later, and he would have bled out. He packed his instruments carefully. You saved his life. After the doctor left, Nia sat beside Junseo while the guards moved him to the bedroom. She helped position him on his uninjured side, checked his bandages, monitored his breathing. Then she finally let herself break down. The adrenaline that had been holding her together for hours evaporated all at once, leaving her shaking and hollow. She collapsed into the chair beside the bed, buried her face in her hands, and cried. For the violence she'd witnessed, for the man she'd hit with a pipe, for the terror of watching Junseo get shot, for the blood on her hands, literal and metaphorical. She'd crossed more than a line tonight. She'd burned the bridge behind her. Mutbas. Junseo woke just after dawn, his eyes opening slowly, confusion flickering across his face before memory caught up. Nia. His voice was rough, dry. She was there immediately, a glass of water already in her hand. Don't move. You'll tear the stitches. He let her help him drink, wincing at the movement. Taemin? Dead. The others? 3 of your men wounded, 1 seriously, but alive. Everyone else who came at us didn't make it out. Junseo absorbed that silently, his eyes tracking over her face, lingering on the bruises around her throat. You disobeyed my orders. I saved your life. You could have been killed. So could you. She set the water glass down. We can fight about this later. Right now, you need rest. I'm not going to win this argument, am I? Not even close. Something that might have been a smile tugged at his mouth. Then his expression turned serious. What you did tonight, hitting that man, staying calm while I was bleeding out, assisting with surgery, that's not something most people could handle. I'm not most people. No. His hand found hers, his grip weak but steady. You're not. They sat in silence for a while, dawnlight filtering through the windows, the city waking up beyond the bulletproof glass. What happens now? Naya asked finally. Now we rebuild. Taemin's faction is gone. The Baekdu leadership got what they wanted, proof that I'm still capable of handling threats, and you, he paused. You proved you're not just someone I need to protect. You're someone who can stand beside me in this world. Is that what you want? Me standing beside you? It's the only thing I want. Nia thought about her apartment, about the eviction notice she'd never dealt with, about the life she'd been living 6 months ago. Invisible, exhausted, drowning. That woman felt like a stranger now. I need to go back to work eventually, she said. I have patients who need me, a career I spent years building. I'm not giving that up. I wouldn't ask you to. But things will be different now. People will know I'm with you, that I was there when Taemin died. Yes, Marcus was right about one thing, Nia said quietly. Your world is violent, and I'm part of it now, whether I like it or not. Do you regret it? She looked at him, this man who'd killed for her, who'd nearly died protecting her, who'd shown her both tenderness and brutality in equal measure. No, she said. I don't regret it. Junseo's hand tightened around hers. Then we'll figure out the rest together. But even as Nia said the words, even as she sat beside him in the aftermath of violence, part of her wondered what she'd become. Because the woman who'd walked into that warehouse, who'd swung a pipe at an armed man, who'd watched people die without flinching, that woman was someone she barely recognized. And she wasn't sure yet if that transformation was freedom or damnation. 3 days later, Nia returned to Chicago Memorial for her first shift since the warehouse. The bruises on her throat had faded to yellow-green, easily hidden beneath the collar of her scrubs. Junseo had protested her going back so soon, but she'd insisted. She needed normalcy, needed to remember who she was before the violence. Lisa cornered her in the break room within an hour. Okay, what the hell happened to your neck? She demanded, pulling Naya's collar aside to reveal the fading bruises. It's nothing. That's not nothing. That's someone's handprint. Lisa's eyes went wide. Did your guy do this? No, someone else. It's handled. Handled how? Nia met her friend's eyes and said nothing. Lisa went pale. Oh my God. Nia, what did you get involved in? I can't talk about it here. Then where? Because you look like you've been through a war and I'm worried about you. I'm fine, really. Nia squeezed her friend's hand. I promise I'm okay, but some things are better left unsaid. Lisa stared at her for a long moment, searching for something in Nia's expression. Whatever she found made her expression shift from concern to something closer to fear. You've changed, Lisa said quietly. In the past few weeks, you've completely changed. I know. Is it a good change? Nia thought about Junseo recovering in the penthouse, about the $40,000 now sitting in a bank account in her name, about the way she'd felt standing in that warehouse with a pipe in her hands. I don't know yet, she admitted, but it's the truth. Her shift passed in the usual blur of trauma and chaos. A car accident victim, a heart attack, a teenager with a stab wound who looked at Nia with terrified eyes and begged her not to let him die. She saved him, kept him breathing until the surgeons took over. And when she walked out of the trauma bay covered in his blood, all she could think about was how similar it looked to Junseo's blood on her hands 3 nights ago. Same color, same texture, but the violence that caused it was worlds apart. She was washing her hands in the scrub sink when her phone buzzed. Text from Junseo. How's your shift? Same as always. Chaos and blood. Want company when you get off? She should have said no, should have maintained some separation between her hospital life and the world she'd stepped into with him. Instead, she typed, pick me up at 7. When her shift ended, Junseo was waiting outside in the town car, his arm in a sling but his expression warm as she climbed into the back seat. How's the shoulder? She asked. Hurts like hell. Doctor says I'm healing well. He pulled her against him with his good arm. How are you? Tired. But okay. She rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. Steady, alive, real. I saved a kid tonight, 16 years old, stabbed in a gang fight. Will he make it? Probably, if he stays away from whatever put him in my trauma bay. Junseo was quiet for a moment. You do that every day. Save people who'll probably end up back in the same situations that almost killed them. That's the job. It's more than a job. It's who you are. His hand traced gentle circles against her shoulder. You save people, even when they don't deserve saving, even when it costs you everything. Is that what I did with you? Nia asked. Saved someone who didn't deserve it? I don't know if I deserve you, but I'm grateful you stayed anyway. They drove through the city in comfortable silence, the lights blurring past the windows, Chicago spreading out vast and indifferent below them. Somewhere in this city, Marcus was probably lying awake wondering if Junseo would ever come for him again. Somewhere, the Bigdu leadership was counting the money Junseo had paid them to look the other way while Taemin died. Somewhere, men who knew Junseo's name were recalculating their positions, deciding whether he was an ally or a threat. But here, in the back of this car with Nia's head against his chest and his arm holding her steady, Junseo was just a man who'd survived another day. And Nia was just a woman trying to reconcile the healer she'd always been with the fighter she was becoming. Tell me something, she said finally. If you could go back to before we met, before everything got complicated, would you change anything? Junseo didn't hesitate. No. Every choice I made led me to you, so no, I wouldn't change a single thing. Even the violence? Even Taemin? Even that. His grip tightened. Because the alternative was losing you, and that's not something I'm willing to accept. Nia closed her eyes, letting his certainty wash over her. She'd crossed every line she'd ever drawn for herself, become complicit in violence, watched men die, helped the man she loved survive a war. And somehow, despite everything, she didn't regret it. Because, for the first time in her life, Nia Hollowell finally understood what it meant to fight for something. Really fight. With everything you had, consequences be damned. Marcus had tried to break her. Junseo had shown her she was already whole. And the woman who'd walked into a nightclub 6 months ago, desperate and invisible and drowning, was gone forever. In her place stood someone stronger, someone dangerous, someone who'd finally learned that sometimes love required you to become the monster your enemies feared. And as the car carried them through Chicago's endless night, Nia realized she was okay with that. More than okay. She was free. 2 weeks after Taemin died in that warehouse, Nia stood in the administrative office of Chicago Memorial, filling out paperwork for a leave of absence. Her supervisor, Dr. Melissa Chen, watched her with concerned eyes. You've never taken more than 3 consecutive days off in 4 years. Are you sure about this? I'm sure. Nia signed the last form and slid it across the desk. 3 months. Maybe 4. Can I ask why? Nia thought about how to answer that. About Junseo recovering in the penthouse. his organization restructuring in the aftermath of Tai Min's death, the Baekdu leadership demanding meetings to renegotiate terms. About the weight of violence she was still learning to carry, the way her hands sometimes shook when she was alone. "I need time to figure some things out," she said finally. "Personal things." Dr. Chen studied her for a long moment. "The bruises on your neck 2 weeks ago, the way you've been moving lately, like you're waiting for something bad to happen. Nia, if you're in trouble, I'm not in trouble, I promise." Nia stood, shouldering her bag. "I just need space to breathe." It wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely a lie either. The truth was more complicated than Dr. Chen could ever understand. The truth was that Nia had spent 2 weeks watching Junseo heal, watching his empire absorb the shockwave of Tai Min's death, watching herself in mirrors and not fully recognizing the woman staring back. She needed time to figure out who that woman was going to become. That night, Junseo took her to a restaurant on the south side that didn't look like much from the outside. Just another storefront squeezed between a laundromat and a corner store. But inside it was warm and intimate, filled with the smell of soul food and quiet conversation. "I've never been here," Nia said as they settled into a booth in the back. "It's been here 30 years. The owner, Miss Robinson, used to cook for my mother when she first came to Chicago." Junseo's sling was gone now, his shoulder healing but still stiff. "Before everything went to hell, my parents tried to build something legitimate. This was one of the first businesses they invested in." An older black woman approached their table, her face lighting up when she saw Junseo. "Baby boy, where have you been? I heard you got yourself shot." "I'm fine, Ms. Robinson." He stood carefully and let her pull him into a gentle hug that avoided his healing shoulder. "Just needed some time to recover." "Mm-hmm." She turned her sharp gaze on Nia. "And who's this beautiful girl you finally brought to meet me?" "Nia Hollowell." "Nia, this is Evelyn Robinson. She basically raised me after my mother died." Ms. Robinson's eyes softened. "Trauma nurse, right? Over at Memorial?" Nia blinked. "How did you... Akil?" "Baby, I know everything that happens in this neighborhood. And I know Junseo's been different these past few months. Lighter, less haunted." She squeezed Nia's hand. "Thank you for that." Before Nia could figure out how to respond, Ms. Robinson disappeared into the kitchen, returning minutes later with plates of food they hadn't ordered: fried catfish, collard greens, mac and cheese, cornbread that steamed when broken open. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the restaurant's warmth seeping into Nia's bones. "You never told me your mother came to Chicago," she said finally. "She left Korea when she was 23, pregnant with me, running from my father's world." Junseo's voice was quiet, distant. "She tried to build a normal life here, worked 2 jobs, saved every penny, but my father found her eventually, dragged us back to Busan when I was 5. "What was she like?" "Kind. Too kind for the world she ended up in." He set down his fork. "She used to tell me that violence was a choice, not a destiny, that I could be different than my father if I wanted to be. Do you think she was right? I used to think she was naive, that violence was the only language people like my father understood." He met Nia's eyes. "But then I met you, and I started wondering if maybe she saw something I couldn't." "What's that?" "That the strongest thing a person can do isn't surviving through brutality. It's surviving while staying human." His hand found hers across the table. "You do that every day. You walk into trauma bays and see the worst of what people do to each other, and you still show up the next day believing people are worth saving." Nia's throat tightened. "That's my job." "It's more than a job. It's who you are." He squeezed her hand. "And being around you makes me want to be better than what my father made me." "You killed Tai Min." "I did." "You've killed 7 people." "Yes." "And you'd do it again if someone threatened me." Without hesitation, Nia absorbed that, turning it over in her mind. "I should be horrified by that. But you're not." "No." She looked at their joined hands. "I'm not. And I don't know what that says about me. It says you understand that the world isn't black and white, that sometimes protecting the people you love requires you to do terrible things." His thumb traced circles against her palm. "My mother believed violence was a choice, and she was right. But what she didn't tell me is that sometimes the choice isn't between violence and peace. It's between violence and losing everything that matters. Ms. Robinson returned to clear their plates, her expression warm but knowing. You two look like you've got the weight of the world on your shoulders. Just trying to figure some things out, Nia said. Well, let me tell you something I learned in 67 years of living. Ms. Robinson leaned against their booth. The world's gonna judge you no matter what you do. Judge you for being too soft, too hard, too scared, too reckless. But the only judgment that matters is the one you make looking in the mirror every morning. And what if I don't recognize the person looking back? Nia asked quietly. Then you decide if that's someone you want to become or someone you need to leave behind. She patted Nia's shoulder. Either way, the choice is yours, baby. Nobody else gets to make it for you. After Ms. Robinson walked away, Junseo said, She's right, about the choice being yours. Is it, though? Because it feels like I already made it. The moment I walked into that warehouse, the moment I swung that pipe, the moment I watched people die and didn't flinch. Nia pulled her hand back. I can't unmake those choices. No, but you can decide what comes next. He leaned forward. I told you before that if you stay with me, you're part of this world completely. And I meant it, but that doesn't mean you have to become what I am. You can be a healer who's seen violence. You can be strong without being brutal. You can love me and still maintain the boundaries that keep you human. Can I? Because 2 weeks ago, I helped you survive a gunshot wound while men died around us, and I felt nothing. No horror, no regret. Just relief that you were still breathing. That's not nothing, Nia. That's love. Or it's the first step toward becoming someone I don't want to be. Junseo was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. What are you saying? I'm saying I need time. Space to figure out who I am now, separate from you, separate from the violence. I need to know I can still be the woman who saves lives, not just the woman who stands beside you while lives end. His expression closed off, that familiar control sliding back into place. You want to leave. I want to breathe. Her voice cracked. I love you, Junseo, but I need to make sure loving you doesn't mean losing myself. How long? I don't know. Weeks. Maybe months. And if you decide you can't do this, that my world is too much, then I'll tell you. She reached across the table, forcing him to meet her eyes. But I need you to trust me enough to let me figure it out on my own. For a long moment he didn't respond, just sat there with that impenetrable expression, walls going up brick by brick. Then he said very quietly, My mother left my father twice before he dragged her back. Each time she came back a little more broken, a little more defeated, and I spent my whole childhood watching her disappear into herself until there was nothing left. I'm not your mother. I know that, but I've seen what happens when the woman you love walks away, and I'm terrified that if you leave now, you won't come back. Nia felt tears burning behind her eyes. I'm not walking away. I'm taking space. There's a difference. Is there? Yes. She stood, rounding the table to sit beside him in the booth. Because I'm not running from you. I'm running toward myself. And if you love me the way you say you do, you'll understand why I need that. Junseo's jaw tightened, but he pulled her against him with his good arm, his face buried in her hair. How much space? I'm going to stay at Janelle's for a while, work on my applications for the nurse practitioner program. See patients. Remember who I was before everything got complicated. Will you call? Every day. Promise me. I promise. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped around each other in the warm restaurant, while Ms. Robinson moved around them, pretending not to notice the quiet devastation happening in her back booth. Nia moved into Janelle's guest room the next morning with 2 suitcases and the $40,000 Marcus had returned, which she immediately deposited into a dedicated account for her education. Janelle took one look at her face and said, This is about that guy. His name is Junseo. The one who terrifies your ex-husband and sends breakfast to hospitals. Yeah. Are you leaving him? I don't know yet. Nia dropped onto the guest bed, exhaustion pulling at her. I just need space to think. About what? About whether I can love someone that dangerous and still be the person I want to be. Janelle sat beside her. You want my honest opinion? Always. I think you're overthinking this, so he's dangerous, so his world is violent. So what? The question isn't whether he's perfect. The question is whether he makes you happy. It's not that simple. Yes, it is. Everything else is just noise. Janelle squeezed her hand. Marcus made you miserable for 5 years and you stayed because you thought that's what commitment looked like. But this guy, Junseo, he looks at you like you're the only thing in the world that matters. Don't throw that away because you're scared of who you might become. What if who I become is someone terrible? Then you deal with it. But you don't make that decision preemptively out of fear. Nia wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that love could be simple, that choices could be clean, that violence could be compartmentalized away from the rest of her life. But she'd seen too much now, knew too much, and she needed to make sure she could still recognize herself in the mirror before she committed to a future that terrified and excited her in equal measure. The weeks that followed developed a rhythm. Nia threw herself into the nurse practitioner program applications, working late into the night on personal statements and essays. She picked up shifts at Chicago Memorial, falling back into the familiar chaos of the trauma bay. She had dinners with Janelle, coffee with Lisa, moments of normalcy that felt both grounding and surreal after everything that had happened. And every night she called Junseo. Their conversations were careful at first, both of them navigating this new distance. He told her about restructuring his organization, moving more assets into legitimate businesses, slowly extracting himself from the criminal world his father had built. She told him about patience, about the applications she was submitting, about the strange relief of sleeping in a bed that didn't come with armed guards outside the door. "I miss you," he said one night, 3 weeks into their separation. "I miss you too." "Is it getting easier, being apart?" "No." Nia pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "It's getting harder." "Then come home." "I'm not ready yet." "When will you be ready?" "I don't know." She could hear the frustration in his silence, the control it took for him not to push. "I'm trying to be patient, Nia, but I need to know this isn't permanent, that you're not just slowly letting me go." "I'm not letting you go. I'm figuring out how to hold on without losing myself in the process." "And how's that going?" "I don't know yet." It was the truth. Some days Nia woke up certain she'd made a mistake, that she should be with Junseo regardless of the complications. Other days she looked at her reflection and saw someone harder, sharper, and wondered if proximity to his world was changing her in ways she couldn't control. The answer came 5 weeks into their separation, in the middle of an overnight shift. A gunshot victim came into the trauma bay. Early 20s, Korean, multiple wounds to the chest and abdomen. Nia moved on autopsy, calling for blood and prepping for emergency surgery, her hands steady despite the catastrophic damage. Then she saw the tattoo on his shoulder, the same symbol she'd seen on one of the guards at Junseo's penthouse. "Who brought him in?" Nia asked the EMT. "Anonymous drop-off. Someone left him at the ambulance bay entrance." The young man's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, filled with pain. He said something in Korean, barely audible. Nia leaned closer. "What did you say?" "Kang." The word was a whisper, desperate. "Tell Kang." Then he crashed. Nia worked for 40 minutes trying to save him, pouring every ounce of skill and experience into keeping his heart beating. But the damage was too extensive, the blood loss too catastrophic. He died on her table. After, when the body had been taken away and the trauma bay cleaned, Nia stood in the scrub room staring at her blood-stained hands and finally understood what had been bothering her for 5 weeks. She wasn't afraid of becoming someone terrible. She was afraid of being powerless. Marcus had made her feel powerless for 5 years. Taemin had made her feel powerless when he sent that gunman to her apartment. Every debt collector, every eviction notice, every moment of her life where she'd been at someone else's mercy had reinforced that helplessness. But with Junseo, she'd felt powerful. Not because of his money or his influence, but because he'd seen her strength and reflected it back until she finally believed in it herself. The violence wasn't what scared her. The vulnerability did. Loving someone meant giving them the power to destroy you. And after Marcus, after everything, Nia had been terrified of handing that power to anyone. But Junseo had never used it, had never made her feel small or controlled or less than. He just loved her. Fierce and absolute and unconditional. And she'd been running from that because it felt too good, too intense, too much like falling without a net. Nia pulled out her phone with shaking hands and called him. He answered on the first ring. "Nia." It's 3 a.m. Are you okay? One of your men died in my trauma bay tonight. Silence. Then, who? Young guy, early 20s, multiple gunshot wounds. He said your name before he died. Kim Min Ho. Junseo's voice had gone completely flat. He was one of Tae Min's people who defected to my side after the warehouse. Someone must have found out. I'm sorry. It's not your fault. I know, but I still tried to save him, and I couldn't. She pressed her forehead against the cool tile wall. And all I could think while he was dying was that this is your world. People die violently, and there's nothing I can do about it. No matter how good a nurse I am, no matter how hard I try, I can't protect you from this. Nia, see, let me finish. She took a shaky breath. I've been scared for 5 weeks. Scared that loving you means watching you get hurt or killed. Scared that staying with you means becoming complicit in violence I can't control. But tonight I realized something. I was never scared of becoming someone terrible. I was scared of being vulnerable again, of giving you the power to break me the way Marcus did. I would never, I know that now. I think I've always known it, but I needed to feel that fear fully, to sit with it, to understand it before I could move past it. Tears were running down her face now. And I'm done being scared, Junseo. I'm done running from the best thing that's ever happened to me because I'm afraid of getting hurt. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to come home. I'm saying I love you and I don't care how dangerous your world is because you're worth it. I'm saying I choose you completely, knowing exactly what that means. The silence on the other end stretched so long she thought the call had dropped. Then Junseo said, voice rough with emotion, I'm coming to get you. My shift ends at 6. I'll be there at 6:01. He was waiting outside Chicago Memorial when Nia walked out into the cold December morning, the sun just starting to paint the sky pink and gold. She'd spent 5 weeks learning how to be apart from him. It took 3 seconds to remember why being together was the only thing that made sense. Junseo pulled her against him, his arms wrapping around her like he was trying to memorize the shape of her, and Nia buried her face in his chest and finally let herself breathe. I'm sorry, she whispered, for running, for making you wait. Don't apologize, you needed space and I gave it to you. That's how this works. How what works? Partnership, love, whatever we're building together. He pulled back to look at her, his hand cupping her jaw. I meant what I said in that warehouse. You're not my weakness, Nia. You're my strength. And if you need space in the future, if you need time to remember who you are outside of us, I'll give you that. Always. And if I need you to be safer, to pull back from the violence, I'm already doing that. Taemin's death closed a chapter. I've been divesting from the criminal operations, moving everything legitimate. It'll take time, but I'm building something cleaner, something my mother would have been proud of. Because of me? Because of me. But also because you showed me it was possible. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Come home with me. Please. I need to stop at Janelle's first, pack my things, thank her for putting up with me. Then we'll stop at Janelle's. They drove through the city as dawn broke fully. Chicago waking up around them in all its messy, violent, beautiful complexity. Nia watched the streets pass and thought about all the lives being lived in those buildings. People fighting their own battles, making their own impossible choices, trying to figure out how to survive in a world that didn't make it easy. She'd spent her whole life trying to save people. Maybe it was time to let someone save her too. 3 months later, Nia stood in the empty storefront on Chicago's South Side. Blueprint spread across a folding table, while construction workers moved around her, gutting the space down to the studs. You're sure about the layout? Junseo asked, studying the plans over her shoulder. His arm was completely healed now, full range of motion restored. Once we start building, it's expensive to change. I'm sure. Nia traced the design with one finger. Waiting room here, 3 exam rooms, a procedure space for minor surgeries and wound care, community health education center in the back. And you'll run it? Once I finish my nurse practitioner program, yeah. Until then, I'll hire physicians and work as a staff nurse. She turned to face him. But this is mine, Junseo. My vision, my rules, my clinic. You're funding it, but you don't get to control it. I know that. Do you? Because the minute you start making decisions without consulting me, The minute this becomes another thing you manage and manipulate, I walk. Noted, his mouth curved. Anything else? Yeah. The clinic's going to serve anyone who walks through that door. Gang members, drug dealers, people running from the law. We don't ask questions. We don't report to police. We just treat them. Can you live with that? Can you? I already do. Every night at Chicago Memorial. She crossed her arms. But some of those people might be connected to organizations that compete with yours. I need to know that won't be a problem. Junseo was quiet for a moment, looking around the gutted space. My mother ran a free clinic in Busan before my father found her. She used to say that everyone deserves medical care, regardless of what they've done. It's part of why she left him, because he couldn't understand that philosophy. And you? Do you understand it? I'm learning. He pulled her against him. This clinic is yours, Nia. You treat whoever needs treating. I'll make sure the word spreads that this is neutral ground. No retaliation, no questions, no violence. Anyone who breaks that rule answers to me. That's not exactly neutral. No. But it's the closest thing to neutral my world allows. Nia studied his face, looking for the lie, the angle, the hidden agenda. She found only sincerity. Okay, she said finally. Let's build something good. Mom. The clinic opened 6 months later on a hot July afternoon with a small ceremony that drew half the neighborhood. Ms. Robinson from the Soul Food restaurant brought catering. Janelle and Lisa came representing Nia's old life at Chicago Memorial. And Junseo stood in the back, watching with quiet pride as Nia cut the ribbon and gave a short speech about accessible healthcare and community investment. Nia had applied the $40,000 from Marcus as the seed capital for her ownership stake. Junseo had provided the rest, the building, the renovation, the equipment, the first year's operating budget. On paper, they were partners. In practice, Nia ran everything medical while Junseo handled the business infrastructure. It worked. The first patient was a 16-year-old girl with an infected wound she'd been hiding from her parents. Nia treated her with the same care she'd given to gangsters and executives at Chicago Memorial, and by the end of the first week, word had spread that the clinic was safe, confidential, and wouldn't turn anyone away regardless of ability to pay. They saw 30 patients in the first month, 60 in the second. By the end of the first year, Nia had hired 2 more nurse practitioners, a physician who split her time between the clinic and Stroger Hospital, and a full-time community health educator. The Hollowell Clinic became a fixture in the neighborhood, not just medical care, but a hub for wellness education, addiction resources, and violence prevention programs. And through it all, Junseo kept his promise. He never interfered with medical decisions, never used the clinic as leverage in his business dealings, just quietly made sure it had everything it needed to succeed. You're different now, Lisa said one evening, a year after the clinic opened. They were having drinks at a wine bar in the Loop, celebrating Nia's acceptance into a competitive nurse practitioner program at Northwestern. Happier, more settled. I feel different, Nia admitted, like I finally figured out who I'm supposed to be. And that's someone who runs a clinic with blood money? The question was gentle, not accusatory, but it still landed hard. It's someone who takes something built on violence and turns it into healing, Nia said carefully. I can't change where the money came from, but I can control what it becomes. And Junseo? Is he different too? He's trying, moving away from the criminal operations, building legitimate businesses. It's slow, and there are still connections he can't sever cleanly, but he's trying. Because of you? Because of himself. I just showed him it was possible. Lisa swirled her wine, studying Nia with an expression that was hard to read. You're really in love with him. Yeah. Even knowing what he's done, who he's been, especially knowing that. Nia met her friend's eyes. Marcus tried to make me small. Junseo helped me become powerful. That's the difference. And if his past catches up with him, if something happens, then we'll deal with it together. It was the truth. Nia had stopped pretending that loving Junseo would ever be simple or safe. But she'd also stopped believing that safety was the most important thing. Purpose mattered more. Partnership mattered more. And building something meaningful in the wreckage of broken things mattered most of all. 2 years after they met, Junseo took Nia back to the Vanguard. He'd rented out the entire club, just like she'd imagined the first time she'd seen him intimidate Marcus into silence. But this time, there was no crowd, no music blaring, no chaos. Just soft jazz echoing through the empty space and city lights bleeding through the windows. "What is this?" Naya asked as he led her onto the dance floor. "The night we met, you asked a stranger to dance because you wanted to hurt your ex-husband." Junso pulled her close, one hand settling at her waist, the other finding hers. "I've been thinking about that moment a lot lately. How different our lives would be if you'd walked past me. If I'd said no." "But you didn't say no." "No. I saw this woman who looked like she was deciding between crying and committing arson, and I thought—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "I thought she's the most real person I've seen in years." They swayed together in the empty club, the jazz slow and intimate. "You changed my life," Junso said quietly. "Not because you fixed me or saved me or any of that romantic nonsense, but because you saw who I really was, the violence and the business and the blood, and you didn't run. You didn't try to change me into something easier to love. You just loved me completely, even when it cost you. It didn't cost me anything I wasn't willing to pay. It cost you your innocence, your safety, your belief that the world could be simple. Maybe," Nia rested her head against his chest, "but it gave me purpose, strength, you. Then I want to give you something too." He stepped back, reached into his jacket, and pulled out a small velvet box. Nia's breath caught. "I know this is complicated," Junseo said, opening the box to reveal a ring, diamond surrounded by emeralds, stunning and understated at the same time. "I know my world is dangerous and my past is violent, and there are things about me that will always carry darkness, but you asked me once if I'd change anything about how we met, and I said no. I still mean that." Tears were already running down Nia's face. "Nia Hollowell," he said, dropping to one knee in the empty nightclub where they'd first collided. "You're the only peace I've ever known, the only person who's made me want to be better than what I was raised to become. So I'm asking, marry me. Build a life with me. Let me spend the rest of my years trying to deserve you." Nia couldn't speak, could barely breathe, just nodded over and over, until Junseo stood and slid the ring onto her finger and kissed her with a desperation that spoke to how terrified he'd been that she might say no. "Yes," she finally managed to whisper against his mouth. "Yes, I'll marry you." They danced in that empty club until dawn started painting the windows gold, holding each other like they could ward off the rest of the world through proximity alone. And maybe they could. Maybe love wasn't about finding someone perfect or safe or easy. Maybe it was about finding someone who saw your damage and chose you anyway. Who met you in the wreckage and said this broken, complicated thing, this is worth fighting for, Shaik. They married 6 months later in a small ceremony at Ms. Robinson's restaurant. The same place Junseo had taken Nia when she first started questioning whether love could be simple. The guest list was small. Janelle stood as Nia's maid of honor. Ms. Robinson cried through the entire ceremony. A handful of Junseo's guards attended, looking uncomfortable in suits that weren't quite concealing weapons. And Lisa sat in the front row, watching her friend marry a man who'd killed 7 people and was trying every day to be someone worthy of her love. "Do you take this woman," the officiant asked, "to be your lawfully wedded wife, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Junseo said, his voice steady, his eyes never leaving Nia's face. "And do you take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, in sickness and health, for richer or poorer, as long as you both shall live?" Nia thought about everything that phrase meant. The violence that would always live in Junseo's shadow. The danger that came with loving someone powerful. The complicated truth that sometimes healing required you to accept darkness instead of running from it. "I do," she said, and meant it with everything she had. They kissed as husband and wife while Ms. Robinson's restaurant erupted in applause, and Nia felt something settle in her chest that had been restless for as long as she could remember. She'd spent 5 years married to Marcus, feeling invisible. She'd spend the rest of her life married to Junseo, feeling seen. Molka. 3 years after they married, Nia stood in the Hollowell Clinic's expansion wing, watching construction workers frame out what would become a dedicated mental health center. She was 36 now. The clinic had grown into 3 locations across the south and west sides. Her nurse practitioner degree hung on her office wall next to her original nursing license. And the woman who'd walked into a nightclub drowning in debt and self-doubt felt like someone from another lifetime. "How's it looking?" Junso asked, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "Good. We should be operational by spring." She accepted the coffee gratefully. "I got the grant approval for the Youth Violence Prevention Program this morning. That's the 5th grant this year." "6th. But who's counting?" "I am." He pulled her against his side. "You're building an empire, Nia, just a different kind than mine." "Speaking of which, how'd the meeting go with the zoning board?" "They approved the housing development. 300 units, 30% reserved for low-income families." He sipped his coffee. "All completely legal and above board." "Your husband is officially boring." Nia laughed. "You're many things, but boring isn't one of them." It was true. Junseo had spent the past 3 years systematically divesting from every criminal operation his father had built. Some of it had been clean. Some of it had required negotiations that Nia suspected still involved violence, though he never confirmed it and she'd learned not to ask. But he was trying. Building something legitimate, something sustainable, something their future children could inherit without shame. "I saw Marcus yesterday," Nia said, watching the construction workers move materials. "He was outside the clinic, just standing there, staring." Junso went very still. "Did he approach you?" "No, just watched for a minute, then walked away." She turned to face him. "I think he finally understands what he lost." "Do you feel vindicated?" "No?" Nia considered the question carefully. "I feel sad for him. He could have had something real, and he threw it away because he couldn't see past his own ego. That's not vindication. It's just tragic. You're more generous than I am. That's why we work." She kissed his jaw. "You handle the justice. I handle the mercy." They stood together watching the clinic expand, 2 people who'd found each other in violence and built something gentle from the wreckage. "Tell me something," Nia said after a while. "If you could go back to that night at the Vanguard, knowing everything that would happen, the warehouse, Tae-min, all of it, would you still ask me to dance?" Junseo didn't hesitate. "Without question. Even knowing the pain it would cause, the people who'd die?" "Even then." He turned her to face him fully. "Because the alternative was never meeting you. And that's not a world I want to exist in." Nia felt tears prick her eyes. After 5 years together, he could still make her cry with his absolute certainty. "I love you," she whispered. "I know." He kissed her forehead. "I've known since the night you walked into that warehouse against my orders. Since you stayed when any sane person would have run. Since you built a clinic on blood money and turned it into something beautiful. We built it together." "No, you built it. I just gave you the tools." "That's not true." "Yes, it is." His voice softened. "You're the strongest person I've ever met, Nia. You survived Marcus, survived Tae-min, survived me. And you did it without losing your compassion or your hope or your belief that people are worth saving. That's extraordinary." "I didn't survive you. I chose you. There's a difference." "Maybe that's even more extraordinary." They stood wrapped around each other as the sun set over Chicago, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. The city sprawled beneath them, violent, complicated, home. And Nia realized this was what healing actually looked like. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of purpose. Not the erasure of scars, but the transformation of them into strength. Not the fantasy of a perfect love, but the reality of a complicated one that demanded everything and gave back more than she'd ever imagined possible. She'd entered Junseo's world as a woman drowning in debt and self-doubt, desperate to wound her ex-husband's ego with a single dance. She'd become someone powerful enough to build an empire of healing in the heart of a neighborhood that desperately needed it. And standing here 5 years later, with a ring on her finger and a clinic that bore her name, and a man who'd crossed every line to protect her, Nia understood something fundamental about the nature of transformation. You didn't heal by avoiding darkness. You healed by walking straight through it and refusing to let it consume you. Marcus had tried to break her with control and manipulation. Junseo had helped her rebuild with honesty and partnership. And the woman who emerged from that fire was someone Marcus could never have imagined. Fierce, unbreakable, whole. "Come on," Junseo said, taking her hand. "Ms. Robinson is holding dinner for us. She's going to yell at us for being late again." Probably. They walked out of the clinic together, past the waiting room where lives were saved every single day, past the community education center where teenagers learned about conflict resolution and healthy relationships, past the photographs on the wall showing the neighborhood's transformation over 5 years. And as they stepped into the Chicago evening, Nia felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because her life was simple or safe or easy, but because she'd finally stopped running from who she really was. A healer who'd seen violence and refused to become violent herself. A survivor who'd been broken and rebuilt herself stronger. A woman who'd looked at the most dangerous man in Chicago and seen not a monster, but a person trying desperately to become more than his father's legacy. The night Marcus Reed had made her feel worthless, she'd walked into a nightclub and asked a stranger to dance. And that single choice had changed everything. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. And sometimes, Nia thought, as Junseo opened the car door for her, and she caught sight of her reflection in the window, confident, strong, unafraid, sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was believe you deserved better, and then fight like hell to get it.